Back in Frosttown, Benjamin gave himself no time to rest. After a brief reunion with his family, he plunged headfirst into the core affairs of the territory, how to feed more than 400 hungry new mouths. Inside the brightly lit office, Sullivan sat with a furrowed brow, staring at a newly drawn ledger. "My lord, you're back," the administrator sighed, his voice heavy with weariness. He reported that the population had swelled by 427 people, more than double the original estimate. This meant half the housing was missing, and food reserves were dangerously low. Benjamin rubbed his nose and chuckled awkwardly. Well, plans can't always keep up with changes. He offered a few words of praise to soothe the loyal administrator, but Sullivan merely picked up his pen with a resigned sigh. "Next time, sir, please send a messenger a day in advance so I can be mentally and financially prepared." The two worked deep into the night, finalizing an emergency plan. They chose several large stone houses intended for granaries as a temporary shelter. Though rudimentary, every person was given a clean straw mat and a thick, coarse linen blanket. True to his promise, Benjamin ordered a massive feast. Outside the dormitory, a giant pot roared over a fire. Baskets of frost cabbage, salted meat, and turnips were tossed into the boiling water. As the aroma filled the air, Benjamin announced, "Dinner's ready, all you can eat." A genuine cheer erupted from the crowd. Benjamin took a bowl to taste the stew, but his face fell. "It tastes like boiled plaster," he muttered to Chesvia, who had appeared beside him. She rolled her eyes. "It grows fast in the frost, Benjamin. Be grateful it doesn't taste like hay." Late that night, Benjamin led Chesvia to a cold, windswept balcony. He looked more serious than ever before. Chesvia leaned against the stone railing, unimpressed. "You'd better have something important to say," she shivered. "It's terribly cold here." Suddenly, Benjamin stepped forward, dropped to one knee, and seized her hands. His palms were hot and sweaty. Chesvia stiffened in surprise, her eyes wide. Benjamin took a deep breath and shouted with all his might, "Coach, I want to build a steam engine." Silence followed, save for the howling wind. Chesvia looked down at him, her expression eerily calm. Slowly, she pulled her hands away. "First of all," she whispered, "I am not a coach, and secondly, you dragged me into the freezing night just to say that." She leaned in close, her silver hair brushing his face. "Do you want my help? Or do you just want someone to go crazy with?" Benjamin's playful expression faded the moment he looked at Chesvia. Her reaction was off. She hadn't laughed at his joke, and her gray eyes seemed unfocused, staring right through him. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice dropping to a low, concerned murmur. "Did something happen while I was gone?" Chesvia didn't answer. "I am." Immediately, she turned her head, hugging herself tightly. "It's a little cold," she whispered. Benjamin cursed his own thoughtlessness. He immediately draped his thick coat over her shoulders. "Come on," he urged. "Let's go inside. The fire is still burning." But Chesvia didn't move. She stood frozen in the biting wind, her eyes suddenly filling with a raw, desperate confusion. "Benjamin," she said, her voice trembling, "don't you find it strange? Why am I here? Why now? Why Frosttown? This is like an absurd drama where the actors don't even have a script." She was hyperventilating, her silver hair whipping wildly in the gale. Benjamin stepped forward, placing his hands firmly on her shoulders. "Calm down, Chesvia. I'm right here. Whatever you want to say, no matter how outrageous, I will listen." This broke the dam. Chesvia shook him off, her usual composure shattering into a chaotic outburst. "Something is wrong. Why did you find me? Is it a joke played by fate, or is there something we've both forgotten?" Benjamin took a deep breath, trying to steady them both. "I found you because we are special, Chesvia. In this world, you are the only one who truly understands me. When I speak of the past, of the things only we know, you are the only one who gives me that look of recognition. You are my comfort in this lonely place." Chesvia's eyes welled with tears. "Then ask me," she screamed. "Ask me who I really am. Why haven't you asked me yet?" "Because I didn't want to hurt you," Benjamin replied softly, his gaze sincere. "I was afraid of pushing too hard, but if you need me to, then tell me. Where are you from? What kind of life did you lead?" Chesvia's body shook violently. Tears rolled down her pale cheeks as she let out a broken, hollow sob. I have no idea." She looked up at him, her voice filled with a profound, soul-deep terror. "I know I went to university. I know I was to be a doctor. I recognize your jokes, but everything else is a blank. Who am I, Benjamin? Before I met you, I wasn't even aware that these memories were missing." The wind howled around them, but Benjamin felt a chill far deeper than the cold. He reached out, gently brushing the snow from her shoulder, realizing the weight of the mystery and the responsibility now resting on his heart. The warm fire dispelled the chill on the balcony, its orange glow illuminating the small lounge. Chesvia sat curled in a cushioned chair, wrapped tightly in a thick wool blanket. Benjamin arrived from the kitchen, carrying a wooden tray with rye bread, honey, cheese, and 2 steaming cups of goat's milk. He sat opposite her, the tray a small bridge between them. Chesvia held her cup, watching the white liquid ripple. Her voice was a soft whisper. I lost my composure just now." Benjamin took a slow sip, his expression turning serious. "It is normal to feel that way. If I were in your shoes, I would go crazy, but we cannot keep avoiding this. We need to investigate." He leaned forward, his hands clasped. "When did you first realize your memory was missing?" Chesvia furrowed her brow, searching the fog of her mind. "Before I met you, I lived in a daze. My brain seemed to actively reject the past, but your presence, it is like a mirror. You remind me every day that a vital part of me is gone." Benjamin nodded thoughtfully. "It sounds like a supernatural force, perhaps a cognitive shield or a curse from a deity. But listen to me," he looked her directly in the eyes. "Whether you regain those memories or not, it does not change who you are to me. I know the woman who handles a blade with calm precision and cares for those around her. Your past shaped you, but it does not define you." To lighten the heavy air, Benjamin flashed a mischievous smile. "Just to be sure, you are from Earth, right? Not some Martian colony." Chesvia let out a soft, genuine laugh. 100% Earth-made. I even grew up watching Zootopia and Frozen in school." Benjamin's face turned wistful. "Ah, the hum of the projector, the chalk dust in the air. I actually saw Zootopia 2 in the cinema just before I ended up here." Chesvia bolted upright, the blanket slipping. "Wait, Zootopia 2 is out." The tension finally broke. For the next hour, the two souls sat by the fire, bridging the gap of years and worlds. They argued over old cartoons, lamented the decline of long-running shows, and laughed about video game bugs. In that cold, alien world, they found a warm anchor in their shared home, proving that while memories may be lost, the connection between them was very much alive. Movie sequels, social media memes, those distant fragments of a past life blurred together, tempting Benjamin to stay in bed, forget his duties as a lord. In the godforsaken chill of Frost Town, the only thing that mattered was the warmth of a thick blanket. But then he heard it, the rhythmic metallic thud of Walter's heels approaching, thump, thump, thump. Benjamin buried his head under the pillow, chanting a silent prayer for silence. He had just resolved a crisis, comforted amnesiacs, and brought home 400 new mouths to feed. Surely he deserved a lion, but Walter's patience was longer than a northern winter. The knocking continued, steady and relentless like a battering ram against his psychological defenses. "Come in," Benjamin finally roared. "The door is unlocked." Walter entered, his face tight with an urgency that banished the last of Benjamin's sleep. He didn't even bow. "My lord, something terrible has happened." Benjamin bolted upright, heart hammering. "An attack? Is it the western frontier? The north?" He reached for the sword hanging by his bed, his mind racing through bloody scenarios. Walter took a deep breath. "Sir, it is not an attack." He paused, his expression solemn. "It is snowing heavily." Benjamin froze. For 3 long seconds he stared in utter disbelief. "What?" he shrieked, his voice cracking. "It's just snow. You nearly broke down my door to tell me it's snowing. This is Frost Town, Walter, not Spring Town." Without a word, Walter strode to the window and yanked back the linen curtains. He threw the latch open, and a white beast of a wind roared into the room. "Cold, cold, cold," Benjamin shrieked, diving back under the covers as the temperature plummeted. "My lord," Walter shouted over the howling gale, "please look outside." Benjamin shuffled to the window like a bloated caterpillar wrapped in his blankets. He looked out and his breath hitched. The world was gone. There were no roads, no roofs, no fields, only an endless, suffocating expanse of silver white. The snow wasn't just falling, it was burying the world. "The autumn harvest," Benjamin whispered, the horror finally sinking in. "The crops." He scrambled into his clothes, screaming orders. "Notify everyone, Sullivan, Chesvia, emergency assembly." As he rushed downstairs, a piercing wail echoed through the administration building. It was Chesvia, the Minister of Agriculture, mourning her vegetable garden. Then came a gruff, sobbing howl from the courtyard, his father, an old farmer watching his life's work vanish under the drifts. The chaos ignited Benjamin's resolve. He grabbed a scrap of cloth, scrawled a single word in charcoal, and leaped onto a stone block outside. He waved the makeshift flag against the biting wind. It read, *harvest. "Stop watching," he roared at the bewildered crowd. "Move, harvest everything, cabbage, radishes, wheat. If it isn't frozen, bring it in, hurry." Under that simple flag, the town snapped into motion. The panic turned to purpose as the people of Frost Town charged into the white, fighting to save their future from the ice. Benjamin watched the crowd swarm like ants whose nest had been disturbed, shouting, stumbling, and sinking into the deep, white fields. He stepped off his stone perch to catch his breath, but a hurried voice cut through the howling wind. "Mr. Ben, the seeds, we must secure the seeds." It was Chesvia. Her silver hair was matted with snow, and her cheeks were flushed a deep red from the biting cold. She explained that while saving the current crops was vital, the improved, frost-resistant cabbage and wheat seeds were the future. If they were lost to the damp or mold, a year of work would vanish. Benjamin's heart skipped a beat. He immediately signaled to Sullivan, shouting orders to prioritize the dry storage sites above all else. Turning back to Chesvia, Benjamin gestured at the oppressive, gloomy sky. He had never seen such a blizzard, half a town buried in a single night. Chesvia's tone turned grave. Scientifically, she explained, an abnormal cold vortex was trapped directly above them, but metaphysically. She spoke of an ancient disaster known as the White Frost, a divinely punishing cold that historically signaled the fall of kingdoms. "Survive. Al is all that matters now," Benjamin declared, shaking off the ominous thoughts. He sent Chesvia to coordinate the seed bank while he headed into the frozen fields to salvage what he could. Meanwhile, at Schieling, the same relentless snow forced the Northern Legion to retreat, bringing a sudden, frozen halt to the border war. Lord Calvin of Stonecliff stood alone in his chamber, staring at his prized knight's armor. A deep, jagged gash dealt by a northern foe months ago marred the metal. "It is time to admit it," Calvin murmured to the empty room. "You are no longer suitable for me." He sat in long reflection, haunted by the name Benjamin Blackwood. A former handyman was now catching up to him. A man born a serf was now influencing the fate of the realm. Calvin realized that while his territory was efficient and his army formidable, his people looked at him with fear, not the love he once sought as a hero. As the wind rattled the glass, Calvin wondered how many of his people would freeze to death while he focused only on military statistics. For the first time, the proud lord felt the sting of a cold, internal mirror. Had he taken the wrong path? Should he stop moving forward? The flickering candlelight within the study could not dispel the gloom clouding Charles's face. He had just received word from the north, and the news was grim. Because of a sudden, cursed blizzard, the northern army had been forced to retreat. Ironhold, the mineral-rich prize they so desperately needed, remained uncaptured. Charles felt a strange mix of spite and regret. He took a small, bitter satisfaction in knowing his elite allies had failed just as he once had, but the strategic loss was undeniable. Without Ironhold, the pincer movement against Princess Celia was broken. He composed himself and walked through the trophy-lined corridors of the castle to the high chambers of Prince Alkia Windsor. Pushing open the heavy doors, Charles found the rightful heir standing before a massive glass window, silhouetted against a silver world of falling snow. "Your Highness," Charles bowed low, "the northern forces have retreated. Ironhold has not fallen." Alkia did not turn. His voice was a calm, unfathomable ripple in the quiet room. "I already know," he said softly. "This snow, it will likely kill quite a few people." Charles bristled, his tone sharp with indignation. "This damned weather has stalled our unification. If not for this disaster, your flag would be flying over the fortress." Finally, the prince turned. His eyes were sharp, possessing a terrifying calm that surpassed even his father's. "Unification is merely a matter of time, Charles," he replied, shaking his head. "The failure of the vanguard only proves this country still has capable people." Alkia moved to a map-covered table, his finger tracing the western regions. He wasn't focused on the north, he was focused on total control. He ordered Charles to squeeze the resistance led by Earl Dragonflame to use the prince's new, devastating siege technology to force a surrender. When Charles warned that the Earl was too fierce to yield, Alkia looked back at the storm. The snow will bring them to their knees, the prince remarked coldly. When the granaries are empty and the people freeze, they will turn on their lord. I want land and obedience, not necessarily a nobleman's head. A chill ran down Charles's spine, but as he prepared to leave, Alkia spoke one more name, Benjamin Blackwood. Charles stiffened, the handyman of the 7 Knights, the one who routed my men at Stonetooth Pass. The same, Alkia mused, looking at a report of Blackwood's recent heroics at Ironhold. While Charles saw a threat, the prince saw something else, a vision of the future. He spoke of Blackwood's united commune and his radical ideas for governance with genuine admiration. I do not want him dead, Charles, the prince whispered, staring into the white abyss. I admire him. He is exactly the kind of talent this kingdom needs. The fire in the hearth flickered weakly, unable to dispel the biting chill seeping through the cracks of the windows. Inside the small room, 3 figures huddled around a wooden table. Chesvia was wrapped so tightly in thick wool blankets that only her head was visible, looking very much like a hibernating squirrel. Her teeth chattered uncontrollably as she looked at Benjamin and Sullivan. There is good news and bad news, she stammered, her voice trembling from the cold. Which do you want first? Benjamin rubbed his frozen hands together and braced himself. The bad news, he replied heroically. I can handle it. Chesvia let out a shaky breath. The bad news was heartbreaking. The crops they had desperately rescued from the snow, the wheat, the turnips, and the beans were doomed. Unless they could be dried immediately, they would rot from the inside out within days. Benjamin felt his heart sink. All that backbreaking work in the freezing fields had been for nothing. Minister, please, Sullivan cried out, his nerves frayed. The good news, quickly. A spark of pride returned to Chesvia's eyes. The good news is, my 2nd-generation frostbite cabbages, they survived. She explained that even buried under the ice, her masterpiece remained healthy. While the wheat was lost, these resilient cabbages would ensure the people didn't starve. Benjamin exhaled in relief, though the relief was bittersweet. These cabbages, as he recalled, tasted like literal plaster. So what if they taste like stinky socks? Benjamin declared, slamming his hand on the table. As long as they fill our stomachs, we will eat them. Sullivan, ever the administrator, immediately began calculating the potential to sell the surplus to other starving territories, but Benjamin cut him down. Making money was a secondary concern. Survival came first. We have a bigger problem, Benjamin said gravely. The cold, Ev. Orion is scrambling to work in the blacksmith shops and charcoal kilns just to stay warm. Burning wood in individual homes is inefficient and dangerous. He laid out a new plan. Frosttown would implement a strict rationing system and establish public heating centers. Fuel and food would be distributed based on labor and need. Sullivan's eyes lit up at the challenge of organizing this new order, his quills scratching furiously across the parchment. As the men debated the logistics of survival, Chesvia's head began to bob. Wrapped in her blankets, she drifted off, dreaming of a warm bed and a door closed tight against the world, leaving the fate of the town to the men and their plaster-tasting cabbages. We're finished. In the plush comfort of Hawthorne Manor, Lord Irwin Hawthorne slumps into his velvet chair, groaning in despair. Outside, a relentless iron-gray winter has gripped the land of Silverbrook. For Irwin, the snow isn't just weather, it is a financial catastrophe. He gestures wildly at his daughter, Lena, lamenting the loss of 8 massive trade orders. To Irwin, the frozen roads and iced-over rivers represent 8 years of his life vanishing into the frost. Lena, however, is focused on a far more dire reality. Downstream, the great watermills of Silver Creek are frozen solid, looking like giant, jagged ice sculptures. 20 villages are now unable to grind their grain. Without flour, they face certain starvation. When she begs her father to intervene, Irwin hesitates. He fears that distributing his private stores would make him look weak or worse, insane to the neighboring lords. To him, charity is a task for the church, not a nobleman. Meanwhile, in the soot-stained workshops of Frosttown, a different kind of struggle is unfolding. Jean Blackwood holds a strange, dark object between his fingers, a round disc riddled with holes like a honeycomb. He looks at his younger brother, Benjamin, with deep suspicion. Will it explode, he asks, or release toxic fumes? Benjamin stands before a workbench piled with coal powder, lime, and clay. For weeks, he has obsessed over this invention. He knew that burning raw coal in poorly ventilated medieval homes was a death sentence, but firewood was running dangerously low. he needed a miracle. Through grueling trial and error, mixing ratios of earth and fuel until his nostrils were permanently stained with black dust, Benjamin has finally perfected the honeycomb briquette. With the workshop silent and the craftsmen holding their breath, Benjamin places a dried briquette into a tin stove and strikes a flame. The orange glow hesitates, then catches. Slowly, the holes begin to pulse with a deep, steady crimson. There is no choking black smoke, only a clean, radiating heat that cuts through the workshop's chill. As the steady hiss of the burning coal fills the room, Benjamin feels a surge of triumph. The honeycomb is burning perfectly. He has found the key to surviving the why. Enter, and perhaps a way to change their world forever. The capital of the kingdom of Lingfeng resembles a wild beast huddled in a blizzard, silent, cold, and exuding an ominous aura of isolation. The towering city gates, inscribed with protective runes, have been tightly shut for 7 days, the massive bolts deeply embedded in stone to sever the inner and outer worlds. A tall figure stands alone in the biting wind. This is Sokka, the bishop of the Lingyuan Church. He wears only a thin, white linen robe, seemingly unaffected by the freezing temperatures. His gaze is fixed not on the gates, but on the stiff, frost-covered body at his feet. It is a middle-aged man. The 42nd soul Sokka has collected in a week. These are the citizens who failed to return before the lockdown, those who pounded on the gates until they froze to death in the snow. 7 days ago, the third Prince Conrad Windsor seized control while his elder siblings, Arkia and Celia, were away at the borders. Conrad coldly announced an emergency lockdown, trapping his own people outside to perish. Sokka kneels, brushing snow from the victim's bluish-purple skin. He softly recites a requiem, a prayer for peace, not mercy. He is haunted by a deep anomaly that permeates the air. Why have the nobles remained silent? Why did the Pope Saliham not respond to Sokka's desperate pleas for guidance? The silence from the church's leadership is as deafening as the storm. Sokka moves the body onto a simple flatbed cart and spurs his horse toward the outskirts. He passes silent houses where residents peek through frosty windows, their eyes filled with a singular, terrifying question: could I be next? At the church cemetery, beneath the branches of an ancient, giant tree, Sokka digs into the frozen earth. There is no ceremony, only the dull thud of the shovel. After the burial, an elderly parishioner approaches him, whispering a warning about the rival Pale Church, who are using this chaos to recruit the desperate. Sokka simply shakes his head and replies, as usual. Inside the church hall, dozens of refugees huddle near a stone fireplace. Sokka passes them in silence and retreats to his room. He gazes at the gray, endless sky. The Pope is silent. The prince is mad. The gates are barred. Sokka's resolve hardens. If there is no word in 10 days, he will wait no longer. He will find a way to enter that self-imposed prison of a city and uncover the truth. Inside the third public heating station of Frosttown, the air is a thick, damp soup of wood smoke, cooking steam, and the huddle of desperate people. Bishop Aphrodite stands behind a massive iron cauldron, his white robes tucked beneath a rugged gray cotton vest. He is a man of hidden strength, his movements precise as he ladles cabbage and turnip stew into a never-ending line of wooden bowls. Next, he says softly, "Hold the bowl steady." He bends down to help a shivering child, ensuring the scalding liquid dough. A scent touched the boy's frozen red hands. Aphrodite is here by the polite command of Baron Benjamin. Truthfully, the bishop is grateful. His own church was nothing more than a roofless skeleton of stone. Had he stayed there, the Baron warned him he'd be found under a white sheet by morning. Now, Aphrodite is the master of this warehouse, though his heart is heavy. He pauses to wipe a single, red rose pinned to his chest, the last survivor of his frostbitten garden. He finally understands the goddess's strange command to learn the art of preserving specimens. Beauty in this world is so very fleeting. As lunch ends, a hush falls. Aphrodite moves to the center pillar and begins to chant. The elderly and the weary join in, their voices stumbling over the holy words, but for a moment the brawling stops. The children grow still. There is only the crackle of the fire and the howl of the wind against the roof. In the shadows, Baron Benjamin watches. When the prayer concludes, the Baron signals Aphrodite to a quiet corner of the kitchen. "You have managed this place well," Benjamin says, cutting off the bishop's modest protests. "I have 7 stations in this town, managed by knights and craftsmen, but this is the only one without theft or brawling. Faith has become a pillar for these people. A way to maintain dignity in the dark." The Baron leans against a stack of grain sacks, his gaze candid. I do not mind your religion, Bishop. If it keeps my people stable, we both win. But Benjamin's eyes sharpen with a sudden, piercing curiosity. I have my own purposes. I wish to understand the power you truly possess. The Baron steps closer, his voice dropping to a low, serious tone. Although it may be presumptuous, Bishop Aphrodite, may I see your blade of thought? The kitchen was quiet, the air thick with the smell of wood smoke and curiosity. Benjamin leaned forward, his voice cutting through the stillness. May I see your blade of thought? Aphrodite stared at him for a long moment, then sighed with a hint of helplessness. He led the Baron to the open, snow-cleared space behind the warehouse. I hope you don't mistake me for a stage performer, Baron, he warned. Benjamin waved his hand dismissively, insisting it was pure curiosity, not disrespect. He had even studied the spirit garden doctrine, noting there was no rule against such a display. Aphrodite didn't argue. Instead, he answered with action. There were no long prayers, no grand gestures. He simply lowered his eyes, focusing his will upon the frozen earth. Suddenly, the dark brown ground began to writhe. Several thick, barbed thorns burst from the soil like venomous snakes, coiling and twisting in midair. Within seconds, 3 enormous pyramid-shaped spikes stood before them, taller than Benjamin himself, exuding a silent, dangerous warning. Wow, Benjamin gasped, circling the structures in awe. Is this the power of the goddess? Can I touch it? Yeah. Don't, Aphrodite snapped. It is woven from my blood and the goddess's power. It will instinctively harm anything that touches it. Benjamin stepped back, hands raised in surrender. As if on cue, the thorns began to disintegrate. They dissolved into tiny specks of light, vanishing into the air until only the cracked earth remained. Incredible, Benjamin whispered. Does it have a name? The thorn of rejection, Aphrodite replied. The Pope gave it that name. I find it quite fitting. Shivering in the biting wind, the 2 men hurried back to the warmth of the warehouse kitchen. Benjamin pulled a ceramic jar of amber liquid from a cupboard, a manager's private stash, and poured 2 cups. Tell me, Bishop, Benjamin said, his tone turning serious. To gain this power, one doesn't need formal training, do they? Isn't faith the only key? Aphrodite held his glass, his voice softening. Indeed, Baron, when faith reaches a critical point, the goddess's gaze falls upon the believer and the blade of thought sprouts like a seed. Benjamin leaned in, his eyes bright with ambition. Then I won't beat around the bush. I want my soldiers and perhaps even myself to win such favor, to protect this land, and to lead by example. Aphrodite took a slow sip of the wine. Honestly, facing one's desires makes for a smoother conversation, Baron. I have no objection. He paused, glancing at the jar. Though I should mention, I was saving that bottle for the guards tonight. Benjamin's smile froze. He looked at the half-empty jar, then back at the bishop, coughing in embarrassment. Rest assured, Bishop, he promised solemnly, tonight you will find that this one bottle has miraculously turned into 2, I guarantee it. Benjamin leaned back in his chair, the messy kitchen of the church feeling far more inviting than the prospect of facing Sullivan's constant worries about bankruptcy. It is quiet here, he mused, much better than the government office. Bishop Aphrodite, though flat in tone, moved swiftly to provide. He placed a wooden plate on the table containing wrinkled boiled beans and dark, hard slices of blood sausage. Benjamin's eyes lit up, but as he bit into a piece, his face contorted in pain. Ouch, it is frozen solid. Aphrodite offered to roast it on the stove, but Benjamin stubbornly refused, crunching through the icy beans instead. It is a unique flavor, he mumbled through the grit, good for the teeth. He washed the frozen meal down with a swig of liquor, though he complained it lacked the fire needed to truly warm a man's soul. If you get drunk, Baron, Aphrodite warned, your official duties will be delayed. Who do you think you are? Benjamin challenged, his pride piqued by the alcohol. Fill it up. Aphrodite didn't just refill the glass, he produced a large jar sealed with a rose pattern. Try this, the bishop said with a newfound warmth. Rose wine from the church courtyard. The 2 men clinked glass. Eased the floral, sweet liquid sliding down their throats. As the jar emptied, the atmosphere shifted from formal to fraternal. Benjamin, his cheeks flushed, suddenly remembered the bishop's companion. Where is that monk, Manhwa? Is he out in the snow? He is contacting colleagues, Aphrodite replied tipsily, in a dream. Benjamin roared with laughter. In a dream, do you sleepwalk to each other's pillows? Offended by the skepticism, Aphrodite leaned in, his clerical composure dissolving. He explained that the goddess connects their spirits in a spiritual garden dream. He added that, according to these dream reports, Benjamin's frost town ranked third in its response to the blizzard. Third, Benjamin slammed the table, his competitive spirit flared by the wine. I don't believe it. Unless you take me to this dream and let me see these other territories for myself, you're just fooling me. Fueled by wine and a desire to prove his faith's power, Aphrodite agreed to the outrageous request. Fine, if you pray sincerely and follow my guidance, it is possible, but do not blame me if you get lost. I am Benjamin Blackwood, the Baron shouted, exuding drunken bravado. Let's see if this online dream of yours is real. Blinded by alcohol and a reckless fighting spirit, two men ignored every taboo of the divine. In the middle of a messy kitchen, the Baron of Frosttown Benjamin and the Bishop of the Spirit Garden Aphrodite frantically pushed two wooden tables together. This makeshift ritual platform was still stained with wine and food scraps, but they didn't care. Aphrodite pulled a silver vial of holy oil from his robes. With trembling, clumsy fingers, he smeared the fragrant ointment across his own forehead and Benjamin's, mumbling about sanctification and connection points. They climbed onto the hard tabletop, nearly rolling off as they lay side by side. Repeat after me, Aphrodite croaked, his voice hoarse from drink. Imagine yourself above the clouds, light, unrestrained. Benjamin's head felt as if it were stuffed with warm cotton. In his drunken haze, focus was easy simply because he couldn't think of anything complex. He mimicked the bishop's fragmented prayer, "Daughter of the Spirit Garden, rise on the fragrance of roses and thorns." As their mental defenses collapsed into a surge of drowsiness, the kitchen fell silent, save for the sound of two men drifting into a heavy, unnatural sleep. But they did not wake in the kitchen. They found themselves in a realm of shimmering, milky white clouds. In the center stood a colossal, white tower of indescribable height. At its summit, three figures were locked in a grim conversation: Bishop Sokka, the rugged Shukro, and the cynical Masku. They spoke of dire omens, the mysterious disappearance of the Pope at the Skinning Chapel, and the arrival of the White Frost, a catastrophic snowstorm threatening to freeze the world. Masku laughed a Pearson. Jarring laugh, predicting that starving orcs and elves would soon tear humanity apart for resources. Sokka began to shout a reprimand, but he was cut off. Suddenly, two loud, jarring noises shattered the solemn atmosphere. "So high it's fucking high," a young voice screamed with drunken excitement. "Where am I?" "Don't move," another voice hissed in a panic. "You've disrupted the landing coordinates. Imagine your feet are on solid ground." Sokka and Shukro froze. They recognized that voice. It was Aphrodite. Two blurry figures tumbled from the sky, staggering as they solidified on the platform. There stood Benjamin, disheveled, flushed, and blank-faced, and Aphrodite looking absolutely terrified. The ritual, against all odds, had actually worked. "I'm so sorry." The words belonged to Bishop Aphrodite, who bowed low before Bishop Sokka. Sokka held his forehead in a gesture of pure helplessness, his gaze drifting toward the man sitting beside them, Baron Benjamin. The Baron sat with his back ramrod straight, hands neatly on his knees, looking for all the world like a nervous student in a sacred interview. "The responsibility is mine," Aphrodite confessed, his voice heavy with sincerity. "I was impulsive. I should never have tried to guide a layman into the dream of the spirit garden, especially while under the influence of alcohol." Sokka sighed, his tone softening as he looked at the Baron. "It is an honor to meet you in this way, Baron of Frosttown." Benjamin jumped up, startled. "Me too, it's just quite sudden. I didn't break any rules, did I? I didn't offend the goddess." Masku, watching from the side, interjected with a smile. "Relax, Your Excellency. The fact that you are here proves the goddess acknowledges your piety." Piety? Benjamin blinked, bewildered. He had only ever supported the church because their doctrines seemed useful. He quickly coughed to hide his confusion. Of course, I am a great supporter of peace and order. If the church needs Frosttown's help, I will do my best." He leaned in, his voice turning serious. "But tell me, what is the news from the capital, this snow?" Before Sokka could answer, his body began to blur, turning transparent like mist in a halo of light. Shukro, standing in the background, raised his head. "We have reached the limit," he warned. "We cannot stay here any longer." As Sokka began to dissolve, Benjamin shouted a final, desperate plea. "Wait, next time, can I come here in a normal way, without the drinking, with an appointment?" Sokka's fading face paused. He gave Benjamin a long, weighing look. Finally, a single, clear word echoed through the consciousness of the two men. "Can." Then they were gone. Sokka, Shukro, and Masku vanished into the sea of clouds. Benjamin slapped his thigh in triumph. He said yes. "Did you hear that, Aphrodite?" They said yes. Aphrodite felt a wave of powerlessness wash over him. He turned away, staring at the churning clouds with a long, weary sigh. Meanwhile, back in the waking world, a voice colder than the winter wind rang out in the kitchen of the heating station. "So, what is the deal with these two drunkards?" Chesvia, the Minister of Agriculture, stood at the door with snowflakes still clinging to her silver hair. She stared at the two disheveled men slumped over a wooden table, Lord Benjamin and Bishop Aphrodite, both sleeping soundly. "I risked freezing to death to come here," Chesvia hissed through clenched teeth, only to find the Lord and the Bishop using the kitchen as a tavern. Evelyn stood quietly by her side. "Chesvia, the trade caravan from Silver Creek has arrived. We have a deal to discuss." Evelyn stepped forward to wake the Baron, but as she touched his shoulder, Benjamin mumbled in his sleep and swung his arm, smacking the back of his hand right against Chesvia's forehead. The air froze. Chesvia closed her eyes, her palm itching with the urge to strike back. She took a deep breath and looked at Evelyn. "Evelyn, slap him, wake him up, slap him hard, and do not hold back." Evelyn remained silent for 2 seconds, then she rolled up her sleeves. A crisp, loud snap echoed through the kitchen. Benjamin let out a pained scream. "Who? Enemy attack, my face." Benjamin sat in the main seat of the manor's reception room, his dark wool coat crisp and smelling faintly of soap, a sharp contrast to the alcohol-soaked state he had been in only recently. Across from him sat Lena Hawthorne, the daughter of the Lord of Silverbrook. She was elegantly dressed in a dark green gown, though her expression was weary. "It has been a long time, Miss Lena," Benjamin began. "How has Lord Irwin been?" Lena sighed, the weight of the season pressing upon her. "The snow is a headache, Lord Blackwood. The rivers are frozen, the roads are blocked, and my father has not had a good night's sleep in days." Benjamin nodded in empathy. "This damn weather has disrupted everything." They moved quickly to business. Lena had arrived to deliver a batch of metal parts from Ironforge, but her true mission was more urgent. She pushed an exquisite leather purse across the table. "I am here to purchase high-quality charcoal. The wealthy merchants and nobles are desperate, and my father is tired of their endless letters." The deal was struck easily, but as the conversation drifted to the state of the kingdom, the news grew grim. Aside from Ironforge, most territories were suffering from shortages, disease, and death. The only silver lining, the kingdom's escalating civil war had been frozen in its tracks by the blizzard. Lena looked out at the town, noting the residents huddling in large buildings. "Do they pay for that shelter?" she asked. "No," Benjamin replied, his tone turning serious. "I provide warmth and food, and in return they provide labor. In times like these, gold cannot buy stability, but an orderly workforce can." Curious Lynn. I asked about the heating, noting that the town didn't seem to rely on firewood. Benjamin's eyes lit up. This was the opening he wanted. He led her to the fireplace to reveal his secret, honeycomb briquettes. These black, columnar blocks of coal powder and clay burned slow and steady, emitting almost no smoke. "Lord Blackwood," Lena laughed, "you aren't just selling me charcoal, are you?" "Indeed not," Benjamin admitted, leaning forward with a salesman's glint in his eye. "I recommend our Frosttown Winter Warmth Joint Gift Pack. It includes charcoal, briquettes, and a batch of our specialty frost cabbage. It is amazingly cost-effective." Lena stared at him, stunned by the sheer audacity of bundling fuel with vegetables, before bursting into a genuine laugh. "Lord Blackwood, your offer is truly tempting." The door to the living room had barely closed when it was violently pushed open. Chesvia burst in like a gust of wind, her white hair disheveled and her gray eyes fixed on Benjamin. "Did you reach an agreement?" she demanded, her voice thick with urgency and doubt. Benjamin leaned back in his high-backed chair, crossing his legs with a smug grin that masked his lingering hangover. "With my personal charisma and our flagship product, they had no choice but to beg for the contract," he boasted. Chesvia studied him for a long moment, searching for any sign of a drunken lie. Finally, her shoulders relaxed. "That's good," she sighed. "I was worried you'd ruin the deal with your nonsense." Then her temper flared. She slammed her hands on her hips. "How could you get so drunk right before a visit from Silver Creek? Don't you want to do business anymore?" Benjamin shrank back but stubbornly argued that his drinking was actually a high-class social activity. He leaned in, whispering that he had successfully infiltrated the Church of the Spirit Garden to gain top-tier intelligence. Chesvia raised an eyebrow, her suspicion turning to curiosity. "Infiltrated? Tell me about it." "It's a long story involving divine power and spiritual dreams." Benjamin waved it off, his expression suddenly turning serious. "But first, are you sure our frost cabbage stocks are overflowing? I won't sign a massive order if our own people will starve." Chesvia's frustration vanished, replaced by pure researcher's pride. She slapped Benjamin on the back so hard he winced. "Would a brother lie to a brother?" she shouted. "Come to the granary, we can't put it all down, it's everywhere." She began gesturing wildly, her eyes lighting up. "My improvements have pushed us into the 3.0 mass production era. The yield is unimaginable, one crop after another like chives sprouting from the ground. We have enough to eat until the year after next. Even your father is addicted. He's been planting mountain terraces with my cabbages like a madman." Benjamin finally smiled, his concerns vanishing. "Then I can confidently secure our development funds." He stroked his chin thoughtfully. "But if they're rotting in the warehouse, we need to process them. Pickled vegetables, kimchi, sauerkraut." Chesvia leaned closer, a mischievous, mysterious smile playing on her lips. "Don't worry, my lord. Seeing you and the bishop passed out like two dead pigs last night gave me an inspiration for the cabbage." She paused, her smile deepening. "I guarantee it will be the kind you absolutely love." The following morning, the snow was finally cleared, allowing the Hawthorne caravan to depart for Silver Creek. Lena Hawthorne stood before the loaded wagons, her expression solemn as she promised Lord Benjamin Blackwood that she would promote their new winter supplies through every family channel. With a final, light-hearted joke about orders falling like snowflakes, she set off, leaving Benjamin to watch the convoy vanish into the white horizon. Taking a deep breath of the biting air, Benjamin turned to his attendants. "Take the crates from Ironcastle," he commanded. "We are going to the factory." The Frosttown Industrial Park was no longer a single, smoky workshop. It had expanded into 4 bustling buildings where the rhythmic hiss of steam and the clang of hammers never ceased. Inside the largest workshop, Benjamin was met by his brother, Jean, who was beaming with excitement. "Brother," Jean shouted over the mechanical cacophony, "what good stuff have you brought this time?" Benjamin patted a heavy wooden crate. "A new steam engine," he replied, "but we have to assemble it ourselves." He had even dragged the reluctant, silver-haired Minister of Agriculture, Chesvia, away from her warm office to witness the event. As the crates were pried open, masterfully crafted parts from Hearthheart gleamed under the lamplight. Benjamin rolled up his sleeves and announced, "Begin the super assembly." Hours later, the excitement had curdled into a heavy silence. Blueprints were scattered across the floor, and the masterpiece parts had resulted in, well, disasters. Chesvia stared at one contorted contraption with deep skepticism. "Are you sure this is a water pump?" she asked. "It looks more like a blender for mashing potatoes and ore." Benjamin stood before another creation, looking entirely blank. He had somehow assembled a pile of cylinders and valves into something resembling a metallic humanoid. "I think," he muttered, "I accidentally built half a Gundam." The only success was a standard steam unit built by Jean's team. However, there was one unexpected victory, a complex boring machine that actually worked, promising higher precision for future parts. Benjamin sighed, looking at his abstract art failures. He told Jean not to recycle the scraps just yet. With the coal mines flooding and workers standing knee-deep in freezing water, he was determined to cobble together a functional pump, no matter how ugly it turned out to be. "Brother Bishop." Benjamin's voice rang out through the administrative center with an enthusiasm so excessive that Aphrodite, quietly reading doctrines by the fireplace, nearly dropped his papers into the flames. The young lord strode forward with a suspicious, beaming smile. "Barren," Aphrodite sighed, his tone wary. "That title, it feels a bit strange." "Strange?" Benjamin patted the bishop's shoulder casually. "We've been through the spirit world together. Don't be so formal, brother bishop." Aphrodite's temples throbbed. He lowered his eyes in resignation. Whatever makes you happy. The two were joined by Walter, the commander of the guard, who arrived carrying the chill of the winter air. Benjamin wasted no time. He announced his grand plan to formally promote the faith of the goddess of the spirit garden within the army of Frosttown. His goal? To see if the goddess might grant his soldiers thought blades, powerful spiritual weapons to use on the battlefield. Walter was shocked. Sir, the loyalty of an army should belong to their lord. Faith is personal. Besides, he glanced at the silent Aphrodite, it seems disrespectful to use a goddess just to gain power. Oh, Walter, you're overthinking it. Benjamin waved a hand dismissively. He turned to Aphrodite. The goddess is magnanimous, right? She'd love more people basking in her radiance while they protect their homes. It's a win-win. Aphrodite closed his eyes, his long eyelashes trembling during a brief internal struggle. Finally, he whispered, I have no objection. With the technicalities settled, Benjamin produced a booklet of Frosttown-style doctrines he had written overnight. Walter read it, finding the theology stripped away in favor of a single, blunt sentiment. Since it's free, I might as well believe it a little. Under a rare winter sun, the three men stood before 300 soldiers on the training grounds. Benjamin stepped forward, his voice booming. Gentlemen, meet your new minister of psychological counseling, Bishop Aphrodite. The soldiers stared in confusion. Aphrodite looked horrified, but Benjamin leaned in, whispering that it was just a title to help him serve the men. Then, Benjamin began his pitch. He didn't talk of heaven, he spoke of protecting homes and finding the courage to stand tall in the snow. He ended with his new slogan, since it's free, I might as well believe it a little. Did you hear me? Loud and clear, the soldiers roared. As the ranks dispersed, Benjamin leaned toward Walter with a mischievous wink. Who knows, Walter, maybe the goddess will be in a good mood and give you a blade of your own. Think how impressive that would be. Walter looked at his lord, then at the poor bishop surrounded by curious soldiers, and could only manage a wry smile. I will do my best, sir. The sky over Frosttown was not yet bright, the dim morning light barely outlining the messy contours of the mining area. The door to the workshed creaked open, releasing a whiff of sweat and damp bedding as Carey stepped out. His fingers, deformed from years of labor, gripped a heavy pickaxe. The mine entrance loomed like a silent, gigantic maw, swallowing a new batch of miners as the night shift emerged, soaking wet and exhausted. Carey met his coworkers, their faces grim. The water is up to our knees, one spat. My legs feel like lead, Carey nodded, stretching his aching calves. They spoke in hushed tones of the winter legends of starving snow wolves and monsters that usually haunted the town. Carey pointed to the vigilant guards patrolling nearby. The Lord cleared the lairs 2 years ago, he whispered, but the guards remain, just in case. Suddenly, the rhythmic crunch of boots announced the arrival of Sergeant Jeffrey and 20 armed soldiers. They carried heavy objects draped in tarpaulins. Jeffrey, ever the showman, cleared his throat. Fellow miners, I bring news, the Lord has sent a gift. With a flourish, the soldiers pulled back the covers to reveal a crude, powerful machine of iron cylinders and pistons. A water pump, Jeffrey bellowed. A craftsman quickly clarified, it will drain the tunnels. Your feet will finally be dry. The soldiers then produced wooden boxes filled with dried meat and vegetables, luxuries in this frozen wasteland. The miners' eyes lit up. For hours, the area buzzed with activity. Finally, the boiler hissed to life. A deep, powerful asterisk plop boom echoed as the machine began to labor. Cold, murky water gushed from the hose into a drainage ditch. The miners fell silent, then burst into cheers. Carey gripped his pickaxe, a mix of emotions stirring in his chest. He was a refugee who had found more than just work here. He had found a home. May no fool dare to cause trouble for Frosttown, he prayed silently. Miles away, on a sheltered hillside, Lord Benjamin and Commander Walter huddled behind a snow wall. Benjamin pulled a greased rope. A brief, suffocating silence followed. Then asterisk boom. Snow and frozen soil erupted into the air. As the smoke cleared, a deep crater remained. Walter nodded in approval. These portable dust crystal explosives would be perfect for ambushes. Benjamin weighed a crude iron landmine in his hand, thinking of the pump roaring back at the mine. With a steady supply of crystals from Ironforge and his new inventions, his smile deepened. Calvin was a man of the battlefield, drawing strength from the clash of steel, but the silent resistance of governance was a far more frustrating enemy. The heavy snows had halted the war with the Northern Army, giving Stone Cliff territory a moment to breathe. Yet, as Calvin issued his orders, clear, powerful instructions for border defense, they seemed to dissolve. By the time his will reached the lower villages, it had been filtered through layers of lazy, defiant nobles until it was unrecognizable. He searched the castle library for answers, but the ancient books on aristocratic politics offered only beaut. Wifeful words, not solutions for dealing with the outwardly compliant but inwardly defiant. Calvin felt a growing contempt for these minor nobles who used their intelligence only for trivial etiquette. By comparison, even the hot-tempered alpacas seemed agreeable. News from Ironforge was intriguing. After quelling a rebellion, Ella had completely uprooted the old noble system. She had seized their properties, becoming a wealthy woman overnight and achieving a brutal, forced stability. Calvin's deep voice broke the silence of his study. "Isn't that amazing?" He looked at the three men sitting opposite him. They were nobles who had fled Ella's wrath, men who had supported the Northern Army and attacked Calvin's own allies. Now they sat trembling, their expensive collars soaked in cold sweat. Calvin was genuinely bewildered. How did they have the audacity to seek refuge here, and even ask for new fiefdoms? The eldest nobleman forced a fawning, hoarse smile. "Your Excellency, I am your father's former comrade-in-arms." Suddenly, an invisible, heavy force descended. The man's voice stopped abruptly as his eyes bulged, his throat gripped by an unseen giant hand. Calvin didn't even look up. He was busy reading a message from Frosttown, a strange letter from Walter that seemed to be an advertisement. It described winter ward gift packs and honeycomb briquettes in absurd detail. Was it a code, or was Benjamin actually inserting sales pitches into secret intelligence? The old nobleman, regaining his breath, roared in a fit of desperate pride, "Calvin, you cannot ignore us, we are nobles." The roar ended in a sickening crack. Without Calvin moving a finger, the nobleman's chair and the man himself collapsed downward as if crushed by an unimaginable weight. There was a dull, nauseating sound of shattering wood and pulverized bone. In an instant, the man was gone, replaced by a dark, viscous puddle of mud and sawdust. Silence returned to the chamber. Calvin's mind drifted back to the letter. Perhaps he really should buy some of those gift packs. They did seem like a very good deal. He wondered if he should send a griffin to pick them up. The administrative center was quiet in the early morning light until Benjamin suddenly bolted upright from behind a mountain of paperwork. "Holy crap!" he shouted, clutching a letter. Calvin actually sent an order. He held the parchment inches from his face, squinting at the ink before rushing to the window to catch the rising sun. The handwriting was unmistakable, vivid, frantic, almost as if the writer were dying on the page. It was Calvin's signature style. The first half of the letter was a dry, clinical report on the royal domain and the movements of the Northern Army. But then, the tone shifted abruptly. In a dead-serious voice, the spy inquired about the winter warmth gift packs. He wanted to know if the honeycomb briquettes truly lasted that long and exactly how long a frost-covered cabbage would stay fresh. Benjamin stroked his chin, stunned. "Good heavens, is our propaganda that effective? Even Stonecliff territory is hearing the rumors." Orders were indeed surging. From wealthy chambers of commerce to local lords, everyone wanted the gift packs. In the factory district of Frost Town, the steam presses were running day and night. The rhythmic asterisk, click-clack asterisk of machinery had become the town's new heartbeat. Payment was pouring in gold shields, grain, salt, even exotic spices and medicinal herbs. But success brought a crushing weight. The bottleneck wasn't production anymore, it was transportation. Benjamin walked to a map on his wall, his finger tracing the winding, snowy paths to Silver Stream and Ironforge. Currently, they relied on hill beasts, massive, shaggy creatures that could trek through snow but possessed bottomless appetites. They were slow and they were expensive. "If only we had trains," Benjamin whispered. He imagined a steam locomotive roaring across the tundra, but he quickly shook his head. His current steam engines, the unit ones, were temperamental, low-power machines. Trying to build a locomotive now would result in a malfunctioning, wriggling, steam-powered oddball less useful than a camel. Then his finger stopped on the map. He hadn't even laid an inch of track. Wait, the tracks! He searched his memories of history textbooks. The first tracks weren't for steam engines, they were for mines. Long before the locomotive, horses pulled carts over wooden rails covered in iron. Benjamin's eyes lit up. Mining carts, rail transport. Why wait for a miracle engine? If he laid simple, wrought iron rails between the coal mines and the factories, a single horse could pull 10 times the weight it could through the mud. They could even use gravity on the downhill slopes. He slammed his fist onto the table, a grin spreading across his face. The dream of the steam train was far off, but the era of the rail was beginning today. Chesvia pushed open the door to the administrative office, finding Benjamin and his team huddled over a desk with dark circles under their eyes. Benjamin looked up not with fatigue but with a manic energy and revealed a new treasure, a sketch for a rail track connecting Frosttown to the mining area. Laying tracks? Chesvia asked, her eyes widening. You aren't planning to run horse-drawn carriages on them first, are you? Benjamin snapped his fingers with a grin. Exactly, it solves our transportation bottleneck immediately. Chesvia studied the plans for the four-wheeled carts and the coal yard routes, nodding in agreement. She mused that the idea was so simple it was a wonder they hadn't thought of it sooner, though she blamed the freezing weather for throttling her brain. Before leaving, she teased a mysterious surprise for Benjamin, warning him to check his budget before the treasurer, Suleiman, complained of an empty purse. Later, Benjamin visited the local bishop, Aphrodite. The bishop had been acting as a listener for the townspeople, helping them navigate the anxiety and loneliness of the eternal winter. After a brief chat, they prepared for the main event, another journey into the dream garden. They lay down on cushions and Aphrodite applied holy oil to their foreheads, beginning a rhythmic prayer. But this time, the magic failed. Instead of drifting into a slumber, Benjamin's mind raced with thoughts of coal production and track designs. He sat up, frustrated. Why am I getting more awake? Aphrodite sighed, realizing the problem. Last time they had entered the dream while half-drunk on rosé wine. The alcohol had acted as a bridge for Benjamin's unrefined spirit. Benjamin's face lit up with realization. I see, we're missing the lubricant. He rummaged through a storage room and emerged with 2 earthenware jars of grain liquor. He plopped back down, shoved a jar into the bishop's hand, and cracked his own open, the scent of honey and roasted grain filling the air. Come on, brother bishop, Benjamin grinned, raising his jar. To our brotherhood, let's have a drink. Aphrodite looked at the liquor, then at Benjamin's eager face. He thought of the chaos of their last dream and the stern face of his superior, Bishop Sokka, but finally, with a resigned sigh, he broke the clay seal. The towering structure still pierces the clouds, its white stone floor smooth as a mirror, while the eternal whistle of the wind provides the only soundtrack. When the consciousness of Aphrodite and Benjamin lands upon the platform, they find Masku, the blue-haired monk, idly drawing glowing circles in the air. He stands, eyeing the newcomers with a raised eyebrow. Even in a dream, the pungent scent of alcohol follows them. Oh, you're here, Masku asks, crossing his arms. Benjamin looks around, disappointed to find the platform mostly empty. Masku explains that the others are simply more punctual, unlike those who treat a pre-dream drink as a ritual. Are you too addicted, Masku scoffs, drinking before entering the goddess's territory? Benjamin waves a dismissive hand, sinking into a chair. It's for spiritual communication, you wouldn't understand. He notes that while Aphrodite is always working the heating station in Frost Town, Masku is rarely seen. I spend most of my time sleeping, Masku rolls his eyes. My physical body is just an anchor point that needs regular cleaning. Enviable, Benjamin burps, a sound faintly scented like roses. Suddenly, light and shadow converge as the solemn monk, Sokka, materializes. His brow freezes in a frown at the sight of the 2 intoxicated men. Before he can scold them, Aphrodite quickly explains that the Baron needs alcohol to relax his mind enough to establish a stable connection to the spirit garden. Benjamin grins, chiming in, brothers united, dreams are easily realized. Sokka's pulse throbbed at his temple, but a new spiritual wave interrupted his lecture. A youth with dazzling blonde hair appeared, Yolia, the bishop of Holy Spring Territory. He looks at the pair with confusion. Did you just come from a banquet? It's complicated, Aphrodite mutters. With only one member, Shukro, missing, the meeting begins. Yolia speaks with heated prejudice against the Pale Church. They are gathering manpower, he insists. I suspect this White Frost natural disaster is their doing. Masku mocks his agitation, but Sokka remains steady, urging caution. Just then, Benjamin, acting the part of the drunken observer, raises his hand. "I have a candidate to help," Benjamin says, his voice suddenly deliberate. "One of the kingdom's new 7 knights and the lord of Holy Spring territory, Livia." He leans forward, the alcohol fading from his gaze. "She is a high-ranking member of the Pale Church, and she is my friend. If I act as a go-between, there is no danger, because that nun is a truly good person." Are you that surprised? When Yolia realized that the disheveled, alcohol-soaked man before him was actually the kind handyman from the legendary tales of the 7 Knights, his attitude shifted instantly. His eyes lit up with a fervent, hero-worshipping glow. "Baron, no, Senior," Yolia leaned forward, his voice trembling with admiration. He confessed to being a loyal reader of the glorious new chapter, praising the handyman volumes for their depth, far surpassing the tired old tropes of knights slaying evil. He spoke of the children near the church who waited breathlessly for the latest stories. Benjamin's lips twitched. He waved a hand dismissively, a heartbroken expression crossing his face. "Stop, stop, the latest edition. Those damned bards and booksellers make a fortune off my life and don't give me the actual inspiration, a single copper." Yolia's face flushed with indignation. "Those profit-driven businessmen, those poets who fabricate stories without respect, they are despicable." Sokka, sensing the conversation was spiraling into a debate on literary ethics, let out a loud, sharp cough. "Thank you for the personal insight, Baron, but let us return to business." He turned to Benjamin with a serious gaze. "How do we gain Sister Livia's trust?" Benjamin's playful mask vanished. "Simple, I will give you a story, a secret known only to Livia and me. Write it in a letter, ensure it reaches her hands alone, and she will know it is no trap." He paused, his voice dropping. "But I have a selfish motive. If she mentions anything I should know, please bring word back to me. News is restricted here in Holy Spring territory." Yolia patted his chest, swearing to return with every scrap of information. With that settled, Sokka's expression darkened. He turned his attention to the grim reality of the royal domain. He described the chilling actions of Prince Conrad, who had ordered the capital sealed tight after the blizz. Zard, leaving thousands of civilians to freeze to death outside the walls. Benjamin, his drunken haze replaced by sharp clarity, stood up abruptly. "Wait, say that again. Conrad is leaving them to die. Is he insane? This destroys his reputation, his very foundation. Who would support a prince who murders his own people?" Sokka nodded heavily, explaining that the surrounding towns were in dire straits. Trade was dead, resources were gone. The people had only 2 choices, stay and starve, or flee into the killing cold. "They don't have 2 choices," Benjamin interrupted, his voice like ice. "Most will die on the road, and those who reach other territories, lords are already struggling. They won't take in outsiders. Without interference, death is the only outcome." The silence that followed was suffocating. Benjamin tried to lighten the mood, suggesting the Pale Church might show mercy, but Yolia spat back in disgust. "Don't count on those cold-blooded guys." Sokka let out a long, weary sigh. "In 2 days, I will personally enter the capital. There is an atmosphere there, one that makes me deeply uneasy." Before Benjamin could press for details, Sokka looked him directly in the eye. "Your Excellency, please consider this a personal request. In this disaster, do not abandon the displaced." Benjamin was stunned. The weight of the request hung in the air, immense and heavy. He looked into Sokka's desperate eyes, thinking of the freezing refugees. The words of refusal died in his throat. Benjamin whispered, his voice solemn. "I will remember your words, Sokka." The conversation had been heavy, far too heavy for a man still nursing a throbbing headache. In the kitchen of the 3rd heating station, Benjamin sat up, rubbing his temples, and muttered to Aphrodite, who was only just regaining consciousness beside him. "Brother Sokka wants me to take in more refugees," Benjamin groaned, trying to shake off the lingering fog of alcohol. "The capital is 1,000,000 miles away. Even if those people had 4 legs, they'd never make it to Frost Town." Aphrodite straightened his robes, his voice calm and measured. "He didn't mean the capital, Baron. He meant that this winter, this endless snow, will not stop. Villages will fall, the displaced will wander. Eventually, they will appear at your gates." He paused, choosing his words with care. "Do not feel pressured." This is Sokka's personal compassion, not a command from the church. He and Yolia belong to the populist faction. They possess what some might call excessive compassion. Later that night, Benjamin dragged his weary steps into the Lord's office. The room was dim, lit only by the flickering glow of candles. His secretary, Evelyn, was already there, hunched over a stack of paperwork. She looked up as he entered, her eyes lingering on his face with an unusual intensity. "Sir, you look unwell," she whispered. "Bad news, Evelyn," Benjamin sighed, warming his hands by the fire. "Ray, the days ahead are only getting harder." He noticed something strange. Evelyn, usually a pillar of stoic efficiency, was trembling. Her brow was furrowed, her lips pressed into a thin, white line. Concerned, Benjamin reached into his desk and pulled out a small metal box. He clicked it open, releasing the sweet, buttery aroma of golden brown biscuits, Evelyn's one true weakness. But today, she recoiled. Benjamin picked up a cookie and took a loud, exaggerated bite. Crunch. Evelyn flinched as if she'd been struck. She squeezed her eyes shut, her face draining of color. "Evelyn," Benjamin said, his voice dropping into a low, commanding tone. He held a biscuit out to her. "Eat it, that is an order." With trembling hands, she took the sweet. She bit down and her world exploded. "Ahi." She doubled over, her face contorting in pure, unadulterated agony. Tears welled in her eyes as she clutched her cheek, her body shaking with a sharp, blinding pain. "Master, please," she sobbed. It hurts so much." Benjamin's expression softened. He reached out, gently patting her shoulder. "Damn it, Evelyn," he sighed, the mystery finally solved. "You have cavities, don't you?" The Frosttown night was cold, but the air inside the doctor's office was thick with a different kind of tension. Benjamin half-carried, half-dragged Evelyn through the door. She was a mess, clutching her jaw, her vision blurring from a pain so sharp it felt like a white-hot needle. At her desk, Chesvia sat under the warm glow of an oil lamp, patiently teaching little Mary to read. She looked up, her silver eyebrows arching in surprise as the lord of the manor hauled in his gasping secretary. Little Mary peeked out from behind her picture book, her big eyes wide with worry. "What's wrong with Sister Evelyn?" she whispered. "Did you not brush your teeth? Are there little worms in there?" Benjamin pressed the trembling Evelyn into a chair and nodded solemnly at the child. "Yes, Mary, you must always brush before bed or the bugs will bite holes in your teeth just like this." Mary nodded vigorously, her face pale with the terror of this sudden life lesson. In this world, oral hygiene was a luxury. While commoners scrubbed with salt and wood ash, tooth decay was a disease of affluence, a curse for those who could afford refined grains and sweets. Benjamin watched Evelyn and thought grimly of the serfs who died of hunger or wore long before a cavity could ever claim them. "So, our genius beauty minister," Benjamin said, gesturing to Chesvia, "would you like to help our patient? She almost died from a cookie just now." Chesvia sent Mary to play with her wooden blocks and stepped toward Evelyn. "Open wide," she commanded. Evelyn, past the point of caring about her dignity, obeyed with a muffled moan. Benjamin even lifted Mary up so she could see the worm's nest for herself. Chesvia held a bright lamp close, probing a dark, brittle molar with a silver needle. Evelyn shuddered as the metal touched the nerve. "Typical decay," Chesvia diagnosed coolly. "Acute pulpitis. The pressure is building. If we don't act, the infection will spread through the root and rot the healthy teeth next to it." Evelyn's eyes filled with pure terror. "Can you pull it?" Benjamin asked, his voice dropping. He knew a botched extraction in these times could mean a death sentence from infection. Chesvia stroked her chin, a smug, confident smile playing on her lips. "I've studied the theory, the anesthesia, the hemostasis. I remember it all." She looked at the pleading Evelyn and sighed. "I'll need to mix an analgesic and have the blacksmith forge some tools. We start tonight." In the administrative heart of Frost Town, a quiet room has been transformed into a somber, makeshift operating theater. Blankets shroud the windows, leaving only the flickering, distorted glow of oil lamps to light the scene. In the center of the room, Evelyn Asterisk sits bound to a sturdy wooden chair, her hands, waist, and ankles secured with cloth strips. She is pale, her forehead slick with a cold sweat born of agonizing dental pain. Opposite her, Chesvia Asterisk waits with her sleeves rolled up, while Benjamin stands by like a mischievous surgical assistant, holding a tray hidden under a white cloth. "You will absolutely never forget today," Benjamin whispers dramatically. He rips away the cloth to reveal a terrifying pair of oversized metal pliers, tools better suited for a blacksmith than a dentist. Evelyn's pupils contract in horror, but Chesvia merely snorts, tossing the monster pliers into a corner with a heavy asterisk bang asterisk. Don't listen to him, Chesvia reassures her, though she immediately picks up a sharp, fine-toothed wire saw. She weighs the tool in her hand, warning Evelyn not to bite her fingers unless she wants to experience the fun of a second extraction. Benjamin steps in, his joking demeanor vanishing as he firmly pins Evelyn's shoulders. The numbing herbs have only dulled the edges of her senses. She is still very much aware. Chesvia wedges a metal elevator into the gum. A sickening asterisk creak asterisk like splitting hardwood fills the room. Evelyn stiffens, a muffled groan escaping her throat. Without hesitation, Chesvia swaps the tool for extraction forceps. She clamps the decayed tooth and begins a rhythmic, steady shake to loosen the roots. Then, with a sudden, calculated twist asterisk pop, the sound of separating tissue signals the end. The bloody tooth is out. Done, Chesvia says flatly, pressing a liquor-soaked cotton ball into the socket. She quietly activates her thought blade power, using a faint, invisible glow to stem the bleeding. As she cleans up, she and Benjamin share a light-hearted moment about using her powers to one day breed 6-winged chickens for the town's food supply. As Chesvia departs, Evelyn touches the empty socket with her tongue. The soul-tearing ache is gone, replaced by a D. Throb, Benjamin helps untie her, dismissing his own role as a mere shoulder masseuse. He leans in with a wink, suggesting that if Evelyn truly wants to thank their talented department head, a small gift would go a long way. In the frozen reaches of the north, within the city of Pearl, Hill wearily closes another report. As a former member of the hero squad, she now navigates a treacherous political landscape, caught between the ambitions of Prince Arkia and Princess Celia. To the world, she is a cold opportunist, but in private, she feels only the weight of indecision. Her isolation is broken by a letter from Evelyn, her secret eyes and ears in the territory of Frosthold. Usually these letters are clinical, filled with data on crop yields and population, but this one is different. It is strangely personal, detailing the daily lives of miners and the warmth of public heating stations. Most peculiar of all is the repeated mention of a winter warmth joint gift pack. Hill frowns, her delicate eyebrows knitting together as she reads the phrase over and over. Evelyn is a professional. She does not waste words on trivialities. Hill holds the paper to the candlelight, searching for hidden codes, but finds only a description of affordable coal and cabbage. Then, a realization strikes. This gift pack isn't just commerce, it is a bond, a way to weave secret alliances under the guise of trade. Purchase 2,000 packs, Hill murmurs to the empty room. We shall call it a reserve for Pearl City. Meanwhile, in the early light of Frosthold, Commander Walter begins his day with a ritual. Above his bed hangs a plaque of Words of Serenity, a psychological tool designed by the Baron and Bishop Aphrodite to sharpen the mind. Walter recites the lines, not because he believes in the divine, but because he trusts the Baron's strange results. As he heads to duty, he encounters Chesvia, the Minister of Agriculture. Since she saved his life after the Battle of Stonetooth Pass, Walter has sensed something otherworldly about her. Her golden eyes seem to hold a depth that defies nature. Walter, Chesvia asks casually, her silver hair catching the mist, if you were to receive the goddess's gaze, what kind of power would you desire? In the past, Walter would have chosen a blade to shatter his enemies, but now, looking into those golden eyes, his answer has changed. I want the power to protect, he says firmly, the Baron, the soldiers, and every soul on this land who believes in us. Chesvia offers no praise, only a faint glimmer in her eyes before vanishing into the morning fog, leaving Walter to wonder if the gods are closer than he ever imagined. Benjamin nearly fell off his chair. Holy crap, Hill got an order. He held the letter close to his eyes, reading it word by word in utter disbelief. Hill, the Lord of the North, had just ordered 2,000 winter warmth gift packs. 2,000 compared to the stingy 500. Units ordered by Calvin, this was breathtakingly generous. Benjamin leaned back, indulging in a golden daydream, imagining orders pouring in like snowflakes, until… bang! The office door was flung open with a self-righteous crash. Chesvia wobbled in, slamming a heavy ceramic jar onto the desk. The impact made the ink bottles jump. Mr. Ben, she said, chin tilted high, open it, I have a surprise for you. Benjamin untied the hemp rope and pulled the cork. Suddenly, An overpowering, pungent aroma surged out like a beast breaking free of its cage. It was sharp, unfamiliar, yet unmistakable. Alcohol, he blurted out, but this was no ordinary ale. He scooped a small tin cup of the liquid clear as spring water and drank it in one gulp. The sensation was instantaneous. A hot, liquid flame swept through his mouth. It felt like swallowing melted fuel. It burned down his esophagus, igniting a tiny fuse in his chest. Cough, ha! Benjamin gasped as a surge of heat exploded in his stomach, dispelling the morning chill. At least 50 degrees, Chesvia, this is amazing. Chesvia leaned against the table, smugly decoding her secret. She had taken the rotting cabbages from the warehouse and, inspired by seeing Benjamin and a bishop slumped over like two dead pigs after a night of drinking, decided to create high-proof distilled spirits. She explained the process, the copper stills, the fermentation, the precise collection of the heart of the run. "Can we mass-produce it?" Benjamin asked, his voice trembling with excitement. "I've recorded every parameter," she replied with a mysterious smile. "I've even named it Lingyuan Happy Water." Benjamin grinned, already seeing the future. This wasn't just a drink, it was a medical disinfectant, a mechanical solvent, and a luxury good that would command a massive price. He could see the new catalog now, the Winter Warmth Premium Edition, featuring a limited bottle of happy water. He looked at Chesvia, his eyes burning with the same intensity as the spirit he had just tasted. "Chesvia," he whispered solemnly, "this is indeed my beloved surprise." Inside the drafty main hall of Blackrock Castle, Baron Guise, a burly man who usually radiated strength, now slumped in his bearskin chair like a wilted eggplant. He stared blankly at the flickering fireplace, letting out a heavy, vexed sigh. His frustration boiled down to one name, Earl Dragonflame. That reliable backer had been utterly humiliated by the Crown Prince's new dust crystal weapons. Now the Earl was hiding in his den like a frightened dog, and the promised subsidies for Blackrock had vanished. To make matters worse, a relentless blizzard, a white frost, had frozen the roads, ruining Guise's plans to seize neighboring towns. Sighing and slacking off again. The sharp voice of his wife, Elena, shattered his self-pity. She marched in, carrying a mountain of untouched ledgers. "I told you to review the tax summaries and supply plans yesterday," she snapped, slamming the tray down. Guise shrank back with a fawning smile. "Honey, calm down. I can't understand those numbers. Just handle it yourself." Elena's fury peaked. She tried to kick his shin, but only succeeded in hurting her own toes. "Hiss, you lazy, shiftless. Do you have no ambition?" she cried. "Baron Blackwood of Frosttown is researching public heating and rail transport. If we don't catch up, we'll be nothing but followers begging for scraps." Guise tuned her out, his eyes drifting toward the liquor cabinet. Seeing his stubbornness, Elena's anger softened into a sigh of defeat. She pulled out a slender, leather-wrapped ceramic bottle and thudded it onto the table. "If you must drink, drink this," she muttered. "It's the Frosttown Winter Warmth Premium Edition, a new product from Baron Blackwood." Guise sat up, his interest piqued. "That kid's new stuff, well, I'll have to try it." He tore away the wax seal and pulled the cork. Instantly, a domineering aroma burst forth like a beast breaking from a cage. It was intense, pure, and powerful. Guise took a long, deep swig. His body jolted. The liquid was fiery, complex, and explosive. He swallowed hard, letting out a long, satisfied breath of white vapor. "Wow, it's powerful," he shouted, his eyes wide with shock. Compared to this, his usual ale was watered-down horse piss. He took another sip, his face a mask of jealousy and awe. "Damn it," he whispered. "That kid is really going to make a fortune." Evelyn had never encountered a problem quite like this. To her, giving a gift was as foreign as a fish walking on land. In her past life, objects were either mission supplies or spoils of war. But now, sitting in her office on the third floor of the Frost Town Administrative Center, she watched the first snow fall and considered a new motive. Chesvia had pulled out Evelyn's agonizingly decayed tooth, and more importantly, Chesvia made incredible desserts. To Evelyn, a gift wasn't just a thank you, it was a strategic investment in a long-term confectionery supply. But what to give? Her desk drawer held only lockpicks, medicine, and daggers, none of which screamed friendship. Seeking professional advice, she first encountered Sullivan. The administrator drifted in like a ghost, offering a vague philosophical lecture on interpersonal resource exchange. Give her something beautiful and meaningful, he whispered mysteriously before floating away. Evelyn stared at her sharpest dagger. Beautiful, yes, meaningful, only if I intend to pierce her heart. She sighed and headed to the canteen. There she found Bishop Aphrodite and Knight Walter. The bishop suggested something solidified in time, like a stone tablet. Walter suggested rare moonlight moss, which Evelyn noted cost 15 gold shields, far more than her current salary allowed. Frustrated, she visited the town hospital to see Diona, who was shive. Ring under 3 blankets. The young man, delirious with fever, could only recall Chesvia asking him about Nen blades. He vaguely remembered suggesting a spear that tells jokes. Evelyn realized she was on her own. Finally, she found Benjamin in the Lord's office. With a mischievous grin, he produced a small, amber-colored pendant. Inside the resin sat a small, black-spotted object. Evelyn's blood ran cold. Is that my tooth? Yes, Benjamin beamed. A testament to your painful journey. Evelyn's hand drifted toward her dagger, and Benjamin wisely fled, leaving the pendant behind. That evening, Chesvia returned to her room to find a small box. Inside, resting on velvet, was an amber pendant, but it didn't contain a tooth. Evelyn had replaced it with a rare seed. A few days later, Evelyn found a return gift on her desk. 6 handmade honey candies shaped like flowers. A note accompanied them. The amber is beautiful. The seeds can be planted in the spring. P.S. The sugar levels are calculated to prevent further decay. Evelyn popped a candy into her mouth. It was perfectly sweet. Watching the snow, she decided that gift-giving was, after all, a very sound investment. The snow in Frosttown was falling like a never-ending party in the sky. On that very day, the guards at the administrative center witnessed an unexpected sight. A carriage, its wheels wrapped in thick straw ropes and pulled by 4 strong black horses, came to a shaky stop. 2 people emerged, to be precise. One jumped and the other was dragged. This damn weather, Baron Guys grumbled, shaking snow from his cloak, his face flushed red. It is absolutely unacceptable to be out at this time of year. His wife Elena gracefully adjusted her skirt, her smile suggesting that if he kept nagging, he would be sleeping in the study tonight. The doors swung open. Benjamin stood there, greeting them warmly. What brings you 2 here? Gus stared at him for 3 seconds. I came by carriage, not by the wind. Can't you see it? It's right there, very big, with 4 horses. Benjamin's smile froze, then widened. Ah, the Baron has quite the sense of humor. Come in, let's not stand in the cold. Inside, the reception room was cozy, featuring a modified fireplace and felt tapestries. On the table sat a pot of frost cabbage placed there by Chesvia, who insisted it was Art Deco. Please sit, Benjamin said. Evelyn, bring fruit tea, the kind with honey. Evelyn peeked in. Sir, according to the new regulations, honey is a 3rd-level supply. You need an application form signed by a department head. Why don't you just sign it yourself? Benjamin sighed. Strictly speaking, your secretary has no real power. Evelyn, tea will be right here. As they settled in, Elena admired the fireplace. Very comfortable, Lord Blackwood. Is there a special design behind this? Benjamin beamed. It's the work of our technical department, improved flue structure. Ease and sheet metal. Actually, Elena interrupted, pulling a roll of paper from her bag. We are here to discuss cooperation. Blackrock Territory has noticed your progress, specifically a transportation facility that improves efficiency. My husband is very interested in seeing it for himself. Benjamin raised an eyebrow. News travels fast. We've only laid 2 miles of experimental track. In business, Elena smiled. Valuable information travels faster than snowflakes. Gus suddenly interjected, by the way, do you have any more of that Linguan happy water? I finished the last bottle in 3 gulps. Benjamin laughed and called for Chesvia. When she appeared looking unimpressed, he begged her to prepare a meal, 8 dishes and a soup. After a bit of playful bickering and a promise of a raise, she agreed. An hour later, the table was laden with food, frosty stew, honey-roasted cabbage, and even cabbage-sauced venison. In the center sat a large bottle of Linguan happy water. Why is it all cabbage? Gus asked, already on his 6th drink. Elena took a sip of the wine, her eyes widening. This is unique, intense, yet mellow. Does it taste like cabbage? Chesvia nodded. It is distilled from cabbage byproducts, a trade secret. The conversation turned to business, trade routes, and technology until Elena's voice dropped to a whisper. The situation in the capital is unstable. Prince Conrad has sealed the gates, disregarding the civilians. Didn't the church intervene? Benjamin asked. The royal guard stopped them. Elena shook her head. Gus poured another glass. Politics is just people arguing while the commoners die. Let's drink to forget the nonsense. Darling, Elena said gently, that is your last drink tonight. But, no buts. Gus did indeed only drink the last glass, if you ignore the 2 secret sips he stole from Benjamin's drink. After their hearty meal, the group braved the biting cold, heading toward the mining district. The snow had lessened, but it still sat ankle-deep on the frozen ground. After 15 minutes of trekking, Benjamin stopped and pointed ahead. This is it. Elena followed his gaze to 2 parallel wooden tracks, thick oak, polished smooth and secured with iron hoops. She crouched down, brushing away the snow to inspect the craftsmanship. Benjamin joined her, explaining that this experimental version was the result of testing 3 types of wood and 4 fixing methods. It was cost-effective, simple to maintain, and most importantly, it worked. As if on cue, the sound of bells echoed through the air. 2 powerful horses appeared, pulling a 4-wheeled wagon loaded with coal ore. It moved with a fluid speed that would be impossible on ordinary snow. The driver tipped his hat to Benjamin as they glided past. Benjamin stood, pride in his voice. On tracks, resistance is reduced and efficiency is doubled. Elena, ever the strategist, peppered him with questions about maintenance, load capacity, and slopes. Benjamin laughed and called for Suleiman, the administrator, who produced a detailed cost-benefit scroll. While Elena studied the data, Gus curiously kicked a sleeper, asking how fast the thing could truly go. Then Elena asked a question that made Benjamin's heart skip a beat. Is it possible to have a self-propelled carriage, one without animal power? Silence fell, save for the howling wind. Benjamin stared at her, searching for any sign that she was a fellow time traveler, but Elena simply explained she had read of such things in ancient books. She was clever, dangerously so, but Benjamin realized she hadn't fallen into any of his modern-world linguistic traps. It's in the exploratory stage, Benjamin replied carefully. Satisfied, Elena closed the file. She proposed a deal. Blackrock Territory would fund the first public railroad between their towns, providing the labor and materials, while Frost Town provided the technical expertise. Later that evening, Benjamin trudged through the snow to the local heating station, carrying a jar of happy water, a liquor strong enough to floor a giant. He kicked the door of Aphrodite's room, shouting for his best friend and drinking buddy. The weary bishop opened the door, immediately suspicious. He knew Benjamin's friendship usually came with a price. Benjamin squeezed inside, slamming the jar onto the table. He wasn't just there for a drink, he needed a teacher for the new school. Me, Aphrodite asked, incredulous. Teach what? Benjamin poured the wine, spinning a tale of literacy, history, and the future of Frost Town. You're an intellectual, Benjamin insisted, pushing a glass toward him. Aphrodite saw through the ruse. What you need is free labor. To our great friendship, Benjamin toasted, ignoring the accusation and downing his drink. Aphrodite sighed, the aroma of the fine liquor breaking his final defenses. I must have owed you in a past life, he muttered, before draining his glass and letting the warmth wash away his reason. In Frosttown, if you want to know who is a seasoned veteran, just ask one question. What is the most tiring job here? Newcomers might guess construction, but anyone who has survived a month will give you the same answer, miner. Carrie was a mole of a man, descending before dawn and returning long after the owls had fallen asleep, but today he was boasting. At the heating station, he held up a piece of smoked meat like a trophy. 5 pieces this month, he grinned. My coal heats half the town. An old-timer snorted over his black bread, warning Carrie that while coal doesn't run away, a man's back certainly does. Lunch was a thick cabbage stew, unusually rich with beans and carrots. The server muttered about new yields from the Ministry of Agriculture, strange talk but good food. As Carrie looked for a place to nap, a skinny, sharp-tongued coworker named Tom leaned. In clothes. Carrie, let's walk in the woods. Carrie refused immediately. There were wolves out there, but Tom whispered a magic word, Edelweiss. The rare winter herb could be traded at the hospital for half a sheep. The thought of that much meat broke Carrie's resolve. The two slipped out like thieves, Carrie clutching his pickaxe for protection. Deep in the silent, snowy woods, Tom scavenged beneath tree roots, explaining that Minister Chesvia needed the herbs for research. Suddenly, Tom cried out he'd found a cluster, but as he celebrated, Carrie's blood froze. Standing 5 steps behind Tom was a nightmare. It had the shape of a wolf, but its limbs were long and twisted like a broken puppet, and its paws ended in gleaming, bone-blade sickles. Carrie choked out. As the creature loomed, Carrie found a frantic courage. He swung his pickaxe with the strength of a man who breaks stone for a living. Bang! He smashed the monster's head again and again until dark liquid stained the snow. Tom screamed in terror, but the nightmare wasn't over. 3 more of the sickle-limbed horrors emerged from the trees, clicking their joints. "Run!" Tom shrieked. They bolted toward the mining camp, sprinting faster than they ever had in their lives. They reached the perimeter just as a 4-man patrol spotted them. The veteran sergeant began to scold them for leaving their post until he saw what was chasing them. "Line up," the sergeant roared, spears in front. The skirmish was brief and bloody. The soldiers held the line with shields and steel, while Carrie managed one final, desperate swing of his pickaxe to bring down the last beast. When the snow settled, 6 men stood over the twisted carcasses. "Is it a wolf?" a recruit asked, trembling. "Only if a wolf had a child with a sickle," the veteran spat. He looked at the 2 miners. They would be punished for leaving, but rewarded for the discovery. Then he looked at Carrie's blood-stained tool. "Hard hit, son. Ever thought about joining the military?" Carrie looked at the mangled monster, then back toward the dark, quiet safety of the mines. "I'll consider it," he whispered, realizing that digging coal wasn't so bad after all. The townspeople gathered around the warehouse, their whispers buzzing like a circus crowd. Inside, Benjamin sat in a makeshift armchair, staring at 4 twisted corpses on the floor with the weary expression of a landlord looking at tenants 3 months behind on rent. "Here we go again," he sighed, "these uninvited winter visitors." Chesvia arrived first, wrapped in so many blankets she looked like a moving snowman. Her eyes lit up as she poked a monster's joints with a stick. "Pure mechanical aesthetics," she muttered. "Nature doesn't grow things like this." Bishop Aphrodite followed, draped in thick fur. He drew a holy symbol over his chest, praying for their souls if they even had souls. He noted that his old church was only 20 miles away, yet he had never seen such horrors until coming to Frostbite. Their origin, the bishop stated, must be in the mountains nearby. Benjamin nodded, nudging a scythe-like claw with his boot. He wondered aloud why they appeared every year like a winter sale. Chesvia was blunt. These were artificial biological weapons. Benjamin's eyes sparked with a wild theory. Perhaps an ancient relic was buried in the mountains, a forbidden laboratory whose defense systems weaken every winter. Sullivan found the idea dramatic, while Aphrodite simply sighed, calling such plots outdated. The debate was cut short as Sir Walter strode in. He ignored the corpses and went straight to Benjamin. "The discussion can wait," Walter insisted. "These things are killing people. My suggestion is simple. We go up the mountain and wipe them out." Benjamin smiled at the knight's directness. "The task is yours, Walter. Use the stockpile, but don't spend all our gold in one trip." Walter's eyes flashed. He moved faster than the winter sunset. He had been planning this extermination for a year. Now, Frost Town had 300 standing troops equipped with black iron shields and heavy crossbows. On the training grounds, Walter's voice echoed, "Gather." As the soldiers formed ranks, a pale but determined Diona staggered over. Despite being bedridden for weeks, the young man refused to stay behind, claiming his bones were rusting. Walter ordered him to the rear for support, then turned toward the peaks. "Zed off." The 300 men moved like a black stream into the white mountain forest. From the window of the administrative center, Benjamin watched them disappear into the snow. Walter was clear from the start. This operation was not an adventure, but weeding, removing the biting weeds choking the path to Frosttown. 300 soldiers advanced up the mountain like a tightening fishing net. Whenever they encountered the twisted limbs of hybrid insect monsters, the net constricted. Spears thrust from behind shields, and crossbow bolts whistled through the air with factory-like precision. "3 on the left," a squad leader shouted. Spears pierced a monster's weak point instantly. "On the right, a bear-shaped one." Walter didn't even turn his head. "Crossbowmen, aim for the head." 3 bolts hissed past, 2 struck with pinpoint accuracy, and the beast collapsed with a heavy thud. Despite the cheers, Walter frowned. They had already killed 47 monsters, more than usually appeared in an entire winter. Lieutenant Barry leaned in, whispering that they had stirred an anthill. Walter wiped snow from his face, grateful the Baron had authorized the strike before these things reached the unprotected miners and woodsmen. As they climbed higher, the wind howled and the snow deepened. Walter personally slew a leopard-like hybrid, his new sword, a gift from Benjamin, slicing through its neck with eerie smoothness. He was briefly lost in a memory of law. St. Winter's desperate struggles until Diona's voice snapped him back. The warrior, recovered from illness and full of fire, pointed toward a jagged black scar in the mountainside. Their lair is just ahead. Walter ordered a 10-minute rest. He watched Diona joke with the men, noting how vital the man's morale-boosting presence was, but as they approached the rift, the atmosphere shifted. A dense, scraping sound, like 1,000 sickles rubbing against stone, echoed from the depths. "Shield wall," Walter roared. A tidal wave of monsters poured out, wolf-like, bear-like, and spider variants with sickle legs. The impact slammed into the shields with a dull thud. The soldiers held, but the pressure was relentless. Realizing the terrain favored the endless swarm, Walter ordered a disciplined retreat to the open slope below. They reached the clearing with only minor injuries, but the men were shaken. Walter knew a direct assault was suicide. He turned to Diona. "Take the dust crystal explosives, set the charges at the crevice, then get out." Diona moved with lightning speed. Walter and his men took cover, hearts hammering against the silence of the snow. Diona lit the fuse and sprinted back. 5 seconds, 10, 15. Boom! A series of muffled, thunderous roars shook the earth. Flames spewed from the crack as a localized avalanche collapsed the hillside, burying the lair under tons of ice and rock. As the snow settled, Diona climbed out of a drift, shook himself off like a dog, and gave Walter a triumphant thumbs up. The weeds had been pulled. Walter's face was as black as the bottom of a cooking pot, not a metaphor, but the literal truth. An avalanche had just buried him in a foul mixture of mud and snow. Beside him, Barry read the injury report, his voice trembling. 12 fractures, 23 abrasions, and one soldier ran so fast he hit a tree. Walter turned slowly. The soldier in question was being carried past, eyes dazed like a newborn lamb. Walter's voice was eerily calm. "Let me guess, how many were trampled by their own teammates, and how many fell into a ditch trying to avoid the snow?" Barry lowered his head. "Mostly the latter, sir." Diona leaned in with a bright, defiant smile. "Look on the bright side, no one died and the avalanche buried that monster-filled crack for us." Walter's eyes snapped to hers. "If someone had died, do you think the Baron would call your idea commendable?" Diona's smile froze. "Well, the Baron is quite open-minded." "Enlightened," Walter corrected, "does not mean without principles." He turned to the troops. "Notify everyone, the use of dust crystal explosives is now prohibited." By evening, the logistics team had performed a miracle, erecting a campsite in just 2 hours. As Walter and Diona shared a hot meal of cabbage and dried meat, a snow-covered scout rushed into the tent. "Sir, the crack has been cleared. We poked it with spears and smoked it out." "Nothing moved, it's empty." "Empty?" Walter raised an eyebrow. "Pick 20 men fully equipped. Diona, you're with me." They returned to the mountain's wound. The entrance was now a reinforced passage, supported by sturdy wooden stakes. Walter checked his gear, shield, longsword, and 2 prohibited dust grenades hidden against his chest, just in case. "Keep formation," Walter commanded. 3 per group. If you see a patch of wall that's the wrong color, report it. They stepped into the dark. The narrow, dripping tunnel eventually opened into a hollow roughly 30 paces wide, but this was no natural cave. The walls were smooth, coated in a grayish-white plaster, and the floor was perfectly flat. "By the goddess," Diona whispered, "this wall is flatter than the ones in my house." Deep in the corner, they found a jagged hole torn open by brute force. It was just large enough for a hybrid insect to pass through. Nearby, embedded in the wall, sat a transparent, glass-like frame. Inside was a yellowed parchment covered in strange, fluid symbols, a language unknown to man, elf, or dwarf. Diona reached out. With a faint asterisk click, the frame popped off the wall. "This might be important," Walter said, his voice heavy. Diona, take your men, return to Frosttown and deliver this to the Baron immediately. I will stay here and fortify this position. Diona nodded, wrapping the artifact in oilcloth. Be careful, Walter. I'd hate to find you stuffed and mounted on a wall when I get back. Get lost, Walter grumbled. As Diona's torches faded into the distance, Walter knelt by the jagged hole, staring into the abyss. Where did you come from? He whispered to the dark. And who built this place? Benjamin arrived at Aphrodite's door clutching 2 cans of Linguan happy water. Inside, the bishop was busy practicing his serious face in the mirror, a futile attempt to intimidate the unruly children at the local school. Stop practicing, Benjamin commanded, slamming the jars onto the table with a heavy, metallic clink. What day is it today? Aphrodite's eyes lit up at the sight of the wine, then quickly dimmed. The days of the dream of the spirit garden, but Bishop Sokka warned that using alcohol to enter the dream world might be unwise. Benjamin didn't miss a beat. The Sokka brothers are busy in the capital investigating why the third prince went mad. Besides, this isn't just a drink, it is a ritualistic auxiliary, meant to better communicate with the goddess. Half an hour later, the two had finished enough liquor to knock out a horse. They collapsed onto the bed, their breathing growing long and even as the world faded away. The dream began like being stuffed into a warm, chatting cloud. As the scene came into focus, they found themselves inside a familiar tower. Yolia and Masku were already there, but today, a new face joined them. The man had long, silky hair and features so perfect he looked like a portrait. He come to life. Benjamin blinked, blurting out a single word, handsome. The newcomer smiled, Baron of Frosttown, just as rumored, interesting. See, Masku pointed an accusing finger at Benjamin. I told you he was drunk, and you, Aphrodite, you're turning from a bishop of the Sacred Heart into a common drunkard. Aphrodite rubbed his temples, muttering about social etiquette, before Yolia cleared his throat to bring the meeting to order. Regarding the Pale Church, Yolia began, looking at Benjamin, I have spoken with Sister Livia. She is an approachable lady, but why didn't you mention she was a powerful lord? Benjamin shrugged, I thought it was common knowledge. Yolia huffed, recalling his rude encounter with the manor guards before turning serious. Livia says the Pale Church is divided. One faction believes the White Frost, a curse from a previous civilization, can be controlled. A previous civilization, Benjamin frowned. The new bishop, a man named Mew, spoke with a calm authority. That civilization did not belong to humankind. The room went cold. Yolia continued, explaining that Livia's moderate faction wants to end the disaster, not control it. Both sides agree on one thing, the White Frost is tied to the capital, and Prince Conrad knew it was coming. One more thing, Yolia added, giving Benjamin a strange look. Sister Livia sends her regards, and your third brother, Percival, he is right there beside her, acting as her bodyguard. Benjamin's mind went blank. Percival, his eccentric brother, was now a key player in the Holy Spring territory. It seemed the family reunion was going to be much more complicated than he ever imagined. Benjamin rubbed his temples, nursing a persistent hangover from his journey into the dream of the spirit garden. I think I know about my third brother's situation, he muttered. My parents would be happy. The Pale Church is a secure job, after all. Aphrodite sat up in bed, his face pale. Can you stop joking? My stomach is still protesting that bottle of wine. Benjamin struggled to his feet, his expression darkening. Speaking of jokes, still no news from Sokka and Shukro. The silence that followed was heavy. Sokka had vanished in the capital and Shukro had disappeared near the skinning chapel, both swallowed by the winter snow. Aphrodite poured a glass of water, gulping it down. Sokka is strong, we needn't worry. As for Shukro, perhaps he is simply too busy to connect to the dream. Mr. Mew said orcs are massing on the western border, Benjamin recalled. It is essentially a declaration of war. Without Sokka, our discussions are a mess, a nauseous stew of ideas. Benjamin swayed toward the door, desperate to sober up. Next time, Aphrodite, improve the way I exit the dream. It feels like being kicked in the head by a donkey. Then stop using strong liquor to enter the dream state, Aphrodite snapped. The door suddenly burst open. A guard shed in breathless, Lord Diona is back. Benjamin's hangover vanished instantly. Let's go. In the administrative center, Diona was regaling a crowd with tales of a hidden rift in the mountains. The walls were smooth as a mirror, he exclaimed. As Benjamin entered, Diona handed him a transparent frame found embedded in a wall. Inside was a yellowed paper covered in strange, alien symbols, neither elvish nor dwarven. "Call Sullivan, Evelyn, and Aphrodite," Benjamin ordered. 10 minutes later, the experts were stumped. The material wasn't parchment and the script was unknown to any living tongue. Only Aphrodite lingered over it, whispering, "I have seen this in my dreams." Benjamin turned to Chesvia, who had been eerily silent. "Chesvia, what do you make of this?" Chesvia didn't look up. Her voice emerged like a sleepwalker's, cold and terrifyingly clear. "That is, the deformed womb of the wizard empire, the flesh and blood nursery." The room went cold. Her light gray eyes began to bleed into an ominous dark red. "The slumber will awaken," she droned. "The old master will return." As the last word left her lips, her eyes turned a full, violent crimson. "Get out of there," Evelyn screamed, shoving Benjamin aside. A sharp sizzle tore through the air. An invisible blade sliced a deep gouge into the stone wall exactly where Benjamin's head had been. Evelyn staggered back, a red stain blooming across her shoulder, the first blood drawn by an ancient, awakening terror. Benjamin lunged forward, helping the injured Evelyn to her feet. She hissed through gritted teeth, her eyes locked on Chesvia. "I'm fine," she insisted, "just a scratch, but look at her." The air in the conference room began to boil with a silent, violent rage. Sullivan scrambled into a corner, his cherished notebook forgotten on the floor. "My goddess," he trembled, pointing a shaking finger. She's flying." Chesvia was half a foot off the ground, not floating gracefully, but hoisted upward by an invisible, jagged force. Around her, the laws of gravity simply broke. Tables, chairs, and scattered documents wobbled and rose into the air. "Whoa-aha!" Diona shrieked as he was swept into the anti-gravity frenzy, flailing like a fish out of water. "Someone help me, I can't feel the ground." "Chesvia, answer me!" Benjamin roared. He felt a stinging pain and looked down to see fine, bloody cuts opening on his skin slashed by invisible blades. The soldiers nearby were bleeding too. Chesvia's head hung low, her white hair whipping in a phantom wind, her blood-red eyes flashing with an inhuman light. Diona was caught in the vortex now, spinning like a sock in a washing machine until his face turned a bruised shade of blue. "Knock her out quickly," Benjamin commanded. Daring soldiers pounced from every direction, but they couldn't get within 3 steps. Bang, 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 they slammed into an invisible wall and flew backwards, sliding down the masonry. "Incapacitated." "Back off," Benjamin shouted, pulling Evelyn away. Suddenly, Bishop Aphrodite stepped forward. His expression was uncharacteristically solemn. "I sense the gaze of the pale goddess," he intoned. "Chesvia's soul is being torn apart. I must intervene." A sickening click-clack echoed as thick, dark brown thorns tore through the floorboards like awakening snakes. They twisted together, forming 3 massive, spiked pyramids, the thorn of refusal. "In the name of the goddess of the garden," Aphrodite cried, pushing his hands forward, "surrender." The thorns moved to cage the girl. Chesvia slowly raised her head, her crimson pupils locking onto the barrier. She simply waved her hand. Puff, puff, puff. The indestructible thorns disintegrated into dust. Before Aphrodite could blink, an invisible hammer struck him. He flew backward like a rag doll, crashing into the furniture before landing in a heap at Benjamin's feet, unconscious. The room fell into a dead silence, broken only by Diona's feeble gagging. Benjamin looked at the fallen bishop, then up at the white-haired calamity hovering in the air. Evelyn was wounded, Aphrodite was out, Diona was spinning toward a blackout. Benjamin realized with a sinking heart, he was the only one left to fight. "Chesvia, listen," Benjamin's voice cracks against the howling wind. High above, the girl hovers, her white hair dancing wildly amidst a storm of lethal debris. Her blood-red pupils gleam with an inhuman light. Benjamin sighs, realizing negotiations have failed. He turns and delivers 2 sharp kicks to the unconscious bishop, Aphrodite. "Wake up, bishop, time to get to work." Aphrodite gasps, his eyes snapping open like a bear dragged from hibernation. He stares at the eye of the storm, his shock turning to a pained seriousness. He tries to stand, but his ribs are shattered. With a grimace, he makes a final, desperate move. He slashes his own wrist. Blood gushes out, but instead of pooling, it transforms. Massive crimson thorns erupt from the liquid, growing into giant, living vines that lunge toward Sesvia. They intertwine, forming a ferocious, blood-red rose that attempts to swallow her whole. "Suppress her," Aphrodite whispers, his voice fading as he drains his very life force into the spell. "I cannot allow him to run rampant here." The pressure in the room eases, but only for a heartbeat. A chilling crack echoes from within the thorns. The rose begins to shatter. Benjamin shouts for Evelyn to evacuate the survivors. As the room empties, Benjamin grabs the dying bishop, trying to pull him to safety. Suddenly, a voice rings directly inside Benjamin's mind. It is not a sound, but a feeling, clear, gentle, and terrifyingly direct. "Relax," the voice murmurs. "This is a gift for a good child." A wave of warmth envelopes Benjamin. It is the gaze of the goddess. Beside him, Aphrodite murmurs in a blissful daze, sensing the divine presence, but the goddess's attention is fixed entirely on Benjamin. "Wake her up," the voice commands. The world shifts. Benjamin sees the flow of raw energy, the chaotic force field around Sesvia and the life force leaking from the bishop. An ancient power awakens within him, the power of a chosen one. This is the blade of thought, a manifestation of one's deepest desire. Benjamin doesn't want to kill, he doesn't want to flee. His strongest desire, the one that summons his blade, is simply to make the girl in front of him wake up. Imagine a desolate sea of stars, a black velvet curtain inlaid with cold diamonds where swirling nebulae look like solidified paint. A massive, striped planet drifts slowly across the void. Chesvia sits in this silence, chin in hand, bored to the point of madness. This is her inner consciousness, a cosmic slideshow theater where she is trapped whenever her body loses control. She has been here long enough to memorize the orbit of every planet in the solar system. "This is really outrageous." The voice rings out directly within the starry sky. Chesvia turns sharply. Benjamin is standing there, dressed in his usual casual clothes, staring dumbfounded at the rings of Saturn floating overhead. "How did you get in?" she blinks. Benjamin smirks, pulling a handkerchief from his pocket. "I thought you'd be bursting into tears, hitting me and asking why I took so long." "I'm not a little girl anymore," she replies, expressionless. Benjamin sits beside her in the void. He explains the chaos outside, how her power is swirling out of control, tossing furniture like toys. He tells her how Diona was spun around like a human top, vomiting rainbows, and how the powerful Aphrodite collapsed trying to restrain her. "So," Benjamin shrugs, "I'm the chosen one. I'm here to take you back. Unless you'd rather stay here and count stars." Chesvia stands up, patting off non-existent dust. "Take me out, now. There isn't a single person to argue with in this godforsaken place." She reaches out. As Benjamin takes her hand, the world shatters. Suddenly, the real world rushes back. Benjamin opens his eyes, feeling as if he's been tossed into a high-speed washing machine. He staggers, caught by his aide, Evelyn. The room is a wreck. Debris is scattered everywhere. In the center of the mess lies Chesvia. She opens her eyes, her gray pupils clear and confused. "I dreamed of stars," she whispers hoarsely, "and you." Benjamin rolls his eyes. "You almost sent us all flying. Aphrodite is unconscious, Diona is sick, and this building needs a total renovation." Just then, bang. The dilapidated door is kicked open. Diona stands there, clutching a long gun, face still flushed from dizziness. "Where are the enemies?" he roars. "I, Diona, am back. Are you ready to face?" He stops. He looks at the quiet room, the unconscious bodies, and Benjamin's judgmental stare. Diona blinks, lowering his gun. "Did I miss th? Final battles?" Benjamin sighs. "No, you just arrived perfectly in time for the comedy wrap-up." The dust in the meeting room hadn't yet settled. Broken tables and scarred walls stood as silent witnesses to the indoor disaster that had just unfolded. Benjamin stood amidst the wreckage, patting his coat and clearing his throat. Everyone, please be quiet and listen to me." He surveyed the room. Evelyn was clutching her wounded shoulder. Diona stood like a rigid pine tree, guns in hand. Aphrodite lay unconscious on a stretcher, and Chesvia sat on the floor, wearing a look of practiced innocence. Finally, Benjamin's gaze settled on Sullivan, the administrator, who was busy salvaging a tattered notebook. "I have important news," Benjamin announced, puffing out his chest despite a stray piece of paper stuck in his hair. Your Baron, in a moment of crisis, has gloriously, he paused for dramatic effect, become one of the gods' chosen ones. Silence followed, then Sullivan began to clap, slowly and very earnestly. Evelyn gave two symbolic taps of her palms while the soldiers offered looks of polite resignation. Diona simply gave a thumbs up before covering his mouth to keep from gagging. Benjamin's face fell. Why aren't you excited? This is legendary, this is hero adventure material. Well, sir, Sullivan replied dryly, compared to your past achievements, becoming a chosen one seems rather unremarkable, a natural progression, really. Benjamin beamed. I like your angle, Sullivan. For such honesty, I'm rewarding you with 20% more workload. As Sullivan's face turned pale, Benjamin turned his attention to the wounded. He ordered treatment for Evelyn and warned the white-haired Chesvia to stay calm. Guiltily, Chesvia approached. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'll be more careful next time. Rather than concealing it, Evelyn interjected through gritted teeth. How about preventing a next time? Chesvia didn't argue. Instead, she stretched out her hand. Shimmering, solid threads appeared in her palm. Her nen blade had evolved. She hovered her hand over Evelyn's shoulder and the wound closed at a visible speed. Chesvia noted thoughtfully that she could now treat injuries, provided she didn't accidentally trigger cellular rebellion or cancer. Later, in the privacy of his office, Benjamin confronted Chesvia. Tell me the truth. Aphrodite said you were possessed by the pale goddess. Chesvia grew serious. She explained that the ancient writings from the mountains had triggered an overwhelming, divine anger within her, an anger belonging to the goddess herself. She feared she might be a vessel for a celestial descent. However, the outburst had a silver lining. She could now read the ancient script perfectly. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. I can translate it for you now, but I'm a non-stick pan. I provide the info, I don't take the blame. She began to recite the translation. In a rigid, bureaucratic tone, it was a report from the 7th Resuscitation Facility of the Wizard Empire. The text detailed a flesh nursery designed to rebuild the Empire's glory and return humanity to its status as servants. Benjamin sank into his chair. This wasn't just a ruin, it was part of a network. A 7th facility implied many more. Frosttown hadn't just found a relic, they had stirred a hornet's nest of ancient, calculated malice. Benjamin sat in his mansion chair, his temples throbbing with a rhythmic ache, a mini percussion performance that had nothing to do with his recent hangover. The true source of his agony was the mountain, specifically that ghostly site in the gray whispering mountains known as the 7th Resurrection Facility. If it exists, we can't just sit idly by, Benjamin muttered to the empty office. But poking at a military research facility of an ancient, evil organization, that was like lighting a cigarette next to a powder keg. The Empire of Wizards, a name scrubbed from official history, lingered only in the cursed fragments of dwarven stone tablets. They weren't the benevolent ancestors of legend, they were monsters who viewed humans as lowly livestock. Benjamin looked at the translated notes, malformed uterus, flesh and blood nursery. A wave of physical discomfort washed over him. This was no place for agricultural tech, it was a horror story. He needed information, the Church of the Spirit Garden, those charlatans had to know something. He resolved to question Aphrodite once the man woke up from his 3 broken rib slumber. In the meantime, Benjamin turned his focus to a more personal development. He had become a chosen one. He possessed a mind blade. While others wielded violent, physical force, his power felt restrained. It was a tool of perception. Closing his eyes, Benjamin reached inward. Suddenly, a blurry map of Frost Town unfolded in his mind. 3 bright spots pulsed in the darkness, Aphrodite in the hospital, the talkative Masku at the heating station, and Chesvia in the administrative center. Curiosity piqued, he focused his intent on Aphrodite. Buzz. A violent sense of weightlessness shoved his consciousness through a pipe of light and shadow. Suddenly, he was looking at a yellowish wooden ceiling. He couldn't move, but he could see through Aphrodite's eyes. It was a shared sensory link. Practical, Benjamin thought, but a bit sinister. He prepared to detach, but just as he pulled away, a massive, irresistible presence erupted on the edge of his perception. It was like a lighthouse in the dark, pulling his consciousness toward it with the force of a black hole. Holy crap, what's going on? His vision became a raging torrent of snowfields and gray mountains blurring past at breakneck speed. Then, everything stopped. He was no longer in a hospital room. The first thing he saw was blood, thick black blood splattered acro. SS walls, floors, and tattered tapestries. The nauseating stench of rust and ruptured organs flooded his senses. He wasn't just watching anymore, he was witnessing a massacre. Benjamin's consciousness is currently trapped in a first-person horror movie he cannot exit. He has no hands or feet, yet he can see, hear, and, most importantly, complain. The scene before him is a nightmare. The ceiling is a mess of rough stone and massive wooden beams from which dozens of thick ropes hang. At the end of each rope is a person swaying silently like dried meat left to wither in a spider's web. Nearby, a blurry figure in a dark robe works at a stone platform. The rhythmic asterisk thud of chopping and the wet asterisk splatter of liquid fill the air. Benjamin diagnoses the situation instantly. This is a slaughterhouse built for psychopaths. He tries to move, but the body he is forcibly inhabiting is too weak to even turn its neck. As Benjamin wails internally, a voice, faint as a flickering candle, resonates in his mind. "Who are you?" Benjamin shudders. The voice is hoarse and strangely familiar. Desperate for an ally, he concocts a noble identity, claiming to be an apostle sent by a kind and upright goddess. When he asks where they are, the voice injects a sliver of power into its reply. The capital, the kingdom of Lin Feng. The royal capital. Benjamin grows serious. He asks what the madman Conrad has done. The voice breaks with pain. "Conrad has broken the taboo. Help me cut the rope." Benjamin's shared gaze lands on a blood-stained dagger lying on the filthy ground. But how? He is a ghost with no physical form. Then a thought strikes him, his Nen blade. It is the power of thought itself. He focuses every ounce of his will on the blade. "Move, asterisk," he commands. "Give me something useful." The dagger trembles. A few beads of clotted blood shake off the hilt. It wobbles, and slowly, it floats. Benjamin manipulates the blade like a drunken butterfly, guiding it toward the thick rope. The rope snaps. The body crashes heavily onto the sticky floor. "Thank you for your help, Baron," the voice gasps. The title hits Benjamin like lightning. The familiar voice, the capital, the investigation. "Bishop Sokka," he blurts out. It is indeed the respected bishop of the Spirit Garden Church. But the moment of relief is short-lived. Tap, taps, tap. Steady footsteps approach. Benjamin feels his connection to Sokka's senses beginning to fray. "Hide," he warns, just as his consciousness is pulled away. Sokka crawls behind an overturned cabinet, gripping the dagger. The footsteps stop. A cold, metallic voice rings out, "Oh, one got away." As Benjamin's signal fades to black, a shadow slowly looms over the bishop's hiding place. In the Lord's office of Frosttown, Benjamin suddenly springs from his chair, his face as pale as paper. A cold sweat beads on his forehead as a rhythmic pounding, like heavy metal rock drums, against his temples. "Sokka, the capital, the slaughterhouse, Conrad," he gasps, clutching a glass of water. The icy liquid offers a moment of clarity. Through his Nen blade, Benjamin has just glimpsed a terrifying corner of the capital. His power has evolved. It is no longer just a link. He can now move objects and control weapons with his mind. It is a staggering discovery, but there is no time for celebration. Sokka is in grave danger. "Sullivan, Evelyn," Benjamin roars, "bring Aphrodite here, and get me 2 pots of the strongest, most bitter herbal tea you have. Nobody is sleeping tonight." Half an hour later, the office has been transformed into a makeshift war room. The unconscious Bishop Aphrodite rests on a sofa in the corner while Benjamin downs a cup of tea that tastes like swamp sediment. He recounts the horror to his inner circle, Sullivan, Evelyn, and Chesvia. He describes the hanging bodies, the madness of Prince Conrad, and his own desperate mental struggle to save Sokka. The room falls silent, save for the crackling fireplace. Sullivan looks bewildered, struggling to process the nightmare, while Diona, speaking through Walter, urges caution and solid evidence. Chesvia, ever the sharp tongue, notes how agonizing it must be for Sokka to have a savior appear, only for the connection to suddenly drop. The door swings open. Evelyn enters with Masku, a young, disheveled believer who would much rather be in bed. But as Benjamin explains the situation, Masku's sleepiness vanishes, replaced by a deathly pallor. "I swear on the cabbage harvest of Frosttown," Benjamin declares, "every word is true." Terrified, Masku realizes this is beyond him. He needs to enter the dream world to contact the other bishops. Without a word of etiquette, he dives onto the sofa next to Aphrodite, grabs a corner of the blanket, and forces himself toward sleep. Exhausted, Benjamin finally listens to his advisors. They draft secret messages to allies and a direct warning to Calvin at Stone Cliff territory, urging him to scout the capital's outskirts. As the letters are whisked away into the snowy night, Benjamin looks at his snoring companions. The bitter tea has finally lost its fight against his fatigue. Okay, he yawns, his eyes fluttering shut. Strategic hibernation. Benjamin was woken by a hunger so fierce he felt he could eat a whole cow. Groggily, he opened his eyes to the soft, afternoon light, realizing he had slept long enough for his body to sound a desperate alarm. He muttered to himself that the first lesson of being a chosen one was that while the abilities were cool, the consumption was amazing and led to a nasty case of hypoglycemia. The door opened and Evelyn entered carrying a tray of steaming rye bread, thick meat soup, and a glass of ale. Benjamin didn't wait. He stuffed bread into his mouth and gulped the ale, asking indistinctly about Aphrodite. Evelyn explained she was still unconscious with 3 broken ribs, but the doctor assured them she would wake in a few days. Feeling his energy return, Benjamin closed his eyes and focused. Nyan Ren, activate. In his mind, the divine chosen radar map unfolded. His perception was immediately pulled toward a light as bright as a searchlight, pulsating from the direction of the capital. "Don't worry, Sokka," Benjamin whispered. "I'm coming." With a violent pull, his consciousness plunged into a blur of motion. When he finally landed within Sokka's mind, he felt a wave of relief. A hoarse, tired voice echoed back, "Barren, it is an honor. I thought the goddess apostle last night was a hallucination." Benjamin quickly realized Sokka was in danger. Through Sokka's eyes, he saw blurred stone walls and heard labored breathing. "Are you running?" Benjamin asked. "Your insight is keen," Sokka panted. Benjamin shifted his perspective, seeing a burly man with grayish-blue skin and a meat cleaver following Sokka with a terrifying cat-and-mouse composure. Sokka was at his limit. Benjamin tried to help by telekinetically throwing a ceramic vase at the pursuer's knee, but it barely slowed the monster down. "I need more powerful equipment," Benjamin decided. He spotted the dagger at Sokka's waist. "Sokka, lend me the knife." The blade trembled, unsheathed itself, and hovered in the air. As Sokka spun around, Benjamin launched the dagger like a crossbow bolt, driving it straight into the man's throat. Sokka lunged forward, grabbing the hilt and twisting with his final ounce of strength. The monster collapsed. Sokka slid down the wall, gasping like a broken bellows. After a moment of silence, Benjamin's voice rang out with exhausted pride. "How was that, Bishop? Range support plus a precise last hit. I'd give us a 9 out of 10. With his last ounce of strength, Bishop Sokka dragged the heavy meat cleaver across the floor and stumbled into a relatively intact room. He shoved the creaking wooden door shut with his shoulder, then slid down against it, panting heavily. Through their shared vision, Benjamin acted as a tactical observer. "A table," he whispered. "There is a table by the door." Sokka gritted his teeth. Using his back to brace against a broken, 3-legged table, he forced it behind the door, a meager obstacle against the horrors outside. He collapsed, the cold handle of the cleaver digging into his skin. "The safe house is set up," Benjamin commented dryly, "though its defense is roughly equivalent to cardboard in a blizzard. Now, my friend, when was the last time you ate or slept?" Sokka's response was a weak thread of thought. "Entered the capital 4 days ago, no food, no sleep, only dirty water." 4 days, Benjamin's consciousness exclaimed. "And you still race that giant? You are the #1 parkour master of the capital, but Sokka, we need to know, what happened here? What has Conrad become?" Sokka remained silent for a few seconds, gathering his strength. "If it is only in my heart, I have the strength to tell it." He began his story. He had entered through the sewers to avoid the blizzard and the guarded walls, but the moment he emerged, the attack began. The attackers were citizens, Sokka narrated. An old woman, children, waiters. They looked normal except for their eyes empty, cold, covered in dust. They felt no pain. I slashed a man's arm and he didn't even glance at the wound. Their souls were gone, leaving only a pure loathing for the living. "Undead?" Benjamin asked, a chill running through him. "Not exactly," Sokka corrected. "They are empty shells, twisted by a force, and they can call out." Sokka described how the city guards and knights arrived next. Their skin had turned grayish-white, their joints were swollen and distorted, some even grew crystals from their flesh. Sokka was surrounded until another group broke into the city. 20 or 30 people, Sokka said, dressed in the robes of the Pale Church. Their arrival drew the monsters away and I escaped to the palace. Did you see Conrad? From afar, Sokka's voice turned solemn. He stood on the palace steps, surrounded by the most ferocious mutants. He looked human, but he moved the creatures as if they were his own limbs. He even glanced in my direction. I fled before I was captured. Silence fell, broken only by Sokka's labored breathing. Thank you for holding on, Bishop, Benjamin said softly. He scanned the room and spotted a dusty ceramic jar in a cupboard. Hey, look what I found, a specialty of the capital, Tyr's apple cider vinegar. Using his mind, Benjamin levitated the jar toward the slumped bishop. Sokka caught the cold vessel and wrenched off the wax stopper. A sharp, fermented aroma filled the air. Without hesitation, he tilted his head back and drank. The moment Benjamin disconnected the royal capital hotline, he felt his brain downgrade from a high-speed server to an old-fashioned abacus. The mental strain of long-distance mind control had drained his energy bar completely. He rubbed his throbbing temples, muttering that if the call had lasted any longer, he might have forgotten how to spell his own name. The news from the capital was beyond outrageous. According to Sokka's report, the heart of the kingdom of Ling Feng had been transformed into a fully automated human slaughterhouse. The bustling streets were now teeming with zombie citizens, and the prince himself appeared to be the director of this horrific spectacle. Benjamin looked around his empty office, trying to process the nightmare. What kind of mess is this? He whispered. The capital was now a restricted-level horror game map. He knew Sokka's view was limited. The man had been too busy escaping a beating to conduct a census, but it was clear the city's core functions had reversed into something dark and twisted. Sullivan, Evelyn, Chesvia, Benjamin shouted toward the door, and bring Bishop Aphrodite here too. If he is still asleep, bring him here, bed and all. To his surprise, Aphrodite walked in on his own. He was pale as a freshly painted wall, clutching his ribs and leaning against the door frame for support. Benjamin greeted him warmly, offering a soda to ease the pain, but the bishop's expression remained grave. He had heard the rumors. Benjamin quickly recounted Sokka's experience, the mutated knights, the controlled Prince Conrad, and the involvement of the Pale Church. The room fell into a chilling silence. Sullivan's quill stopped moving. Evelyn forgot her snacks. By the goddess, Aphrodite whispered, I wish this were a cruel joke. The debate began immediately. Diona, the ever-upright guard, insisted on assembling an army to rush to the capital tonight. But Sullivan, the pragmatist, disagreed. He argued that the capital was no longer the heart of the kingdom, but a nearly torn corpse. He believed the great lords would likely fortify their own castles rather than stage a rescue. Chesvia pointed out that while the powerful families could survive a change in kings, they couldn't survive a sinking ship. Benjamin snapped his fingers in agreement. The responsibility should fall on the high-ranking nobles and the Pale Church. Yet Benjamin's brow remained furrowed. He didn't trust the tall ones to hold up the falling sky. He feared their bickering would allow the mutation to spread until even their remote village was consumed. Sitting idly by is too passive, Benjamin said, his eyes sharpening as he looked out at the falling snow. We cannot act like reckless saviors, but we cannot be ostriches with our heads in the sand either. We need a third option. At the jagged mouth of the 7th recovery facility, Walter stood like a silent knight carved from stone, his brow furrowed deeper than the icicles clinging to the mountain rocks. For 2 days, a single question had haunted him: has something happened to the master? According to the plan, Walter's team was to secure the perimeter and await Benjamin's orders. But the Baron, usually so decisive, had remained silent. They're out again, they're out again. A young soldier screamed, his voice cracking with terror. Without even turning, Walter flicked his wrist. His longsword flashed in a silver arc, slicing through the head of a hybrid insected the moment it peeked from the shadows. Dark liquid seeped into the snow. Drag it away, Walter ordered coldly. Pile it with the others. Before he could decide whether to ride for town, a figure appeared, wrapped in a thick fur cloak and clutching his ribs. It was Bishop Aphrodite. The bishop looked uneasy as he delivered the news. Benjamin had ordered Walter back to Frost Town immediately. There was a bigger matter requiring the knight's attention. Walter hesitated, eyeing the bishop's frail frame. "Are you confident you can hold this line, Your Excellency?" Aphrodite straightened his back, trying to channel Benjamin's confidence. "I am a chosen one of the gods," he replied calmly. Walter bowed his head, yielding the defense to the holy man, and prepared to depart. Meanwhile, in Blackrock territory, Baron Gus was fuming. Between training clumsy farmers and chasing pointy-eared elven raiders, his patience was thin. He stormed into his hall to find his wife, Elena, holding a letter from Frost Town. It was an invitation not for a banquet but for a crucial meeting of the local United Commune. The topic, the capital. "Something terrible must have happened," Gus muttered, a spark of excitement dancing in his eyes. "My bones were starting to rust anyway." Elena kicked his shin, reminding him that peace is better for business, but even she knew this was serious. Far away at Stone Cliff Pass, Calvin rubbed his bloodshot eyes. He was exhausted, buried under maps and the defiance of lesser nobles. When a subordinate dropped the same invitation on his desk, Calvin didn't even look up. "A meeting," he scoffed, his voice thick with fatigue. "Doesn't he know how busy I am? I'm not going, it's too far, I don't have the time."